Yeah.
Fire thumbnail, guys.
Iron Disciples, welcome back to podcast, number 70-ish, 71, guys. And today we have two special guests. This is kind of like a first.
This is our first double.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
first time.
So excited.
And we're going to talk about, I kind of titled it, the churches at a crossroads between feminism and the red pill.
Spicy.
I think most of the audience is kind of figure out where that conversation is going to go.
Yeah.
But without further ado, I want to first introduce the guests. And Will, who's been here before, with Ren of Men is his page. Well, I want you to tell the audience about what you're doing with your page and the badass work you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me again on the show, guys. And Mike, it's good to see you. I host the Renaissance of Men podcast about the 40-year rebirth of masculinity that's now culminating in a rediscovery of the virtues of fatherhood and faith. And so I've been working on that for about 3 years. It's been a very exciting year for me. I also have a documentary film project that I've been working on about that. And I do one-on-one men's mentorship, and I have a new men's group called The Council. And you can find all of that by going to renofmen.com/links.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you. And Will's an exceptionally intelligent, big brain. He's probably smartest
Huge
one
brain.
in this room right now. Yeah.
Brain.
He can do monologues by himself.
All by myself.
For like hours. Not sound like a
I-
retard.
Yeah. I leave Will a message. I just automatically feel like a retard. Yeah,
I'm like, Will, what is this question?
Relatable.
Oh, I probably think I'm stupid.
yeah, for sure.
Please send
Professor
me.
X with the bald head.
Bad. Yeah.
Got my.
Yep.
So much brains, the hair
He just
can't.
too much testosterone fried the hair off his brain.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tweet that.
So alpha, bro.
So
All right.
Alpha.
Without further ado, Mike, tell us about yourself.
Well, man, it's Will's a hard follow up. He truly is. But it's an honor to be on your guys' show. I've been listening for a while, especially after that last episode that you had with Will, which was fire. So yeah, my name is Mike Pantile. It's my last name is pretty much a meme at this point because nobody can pronounce it correctly. I'm glad you guys.
They
I'm glad you
screwed
guys
it
got
up.
I
Like,
did. I was
Mike-
Pantile.
Mike
I like made the
Pantile.
aisle. Yeah.
Some kind of weird Southern Italian. But anyways, man, I'm a husband, father, man of God. I'm a fitness pro. I own a gym. I'm a personal trainer, but I've also stepped into the men's workspace as well. I started this page back in November, and the whole inspiration behind it was I saw a real lack of masculinity in the Christian space. Right, I wasn't aware of all these fine gentlemen in this space, and I said, instead of complaining about it, not that I'm the most, I'm not the arbiter of truth and masculinity, but I'm like, okay, well, I've lived a life that's left some clues. I think there's some things that these young men, at least growing up in the faith, could learn because I see a lot of effeminacy in the faith, and that was kind of the original impetus for the page. I remember I went up to my wife when we first moved here, and I said, just take a picture of me. She's like, why? I said, I'm going to start this man page. And then now here we are. I've stepped into men's work, doing the men's coaching thing, and now I'm the co-host of the Masculine Revival podcast with my good friend and brother, Brendan Schmidt. I don't know if you guys don't follow Masculine Revival already. I don't know what kind of rock you've been living under, but that's where I'm at right now, man.
Yeah.
Masculine Revival.
Yes.
Well, we got to get him on down
Yeah.
the road. for
Yeah,
sure.
100%.
It's a
Brendan's
killer
an
name.
amazing guy.
And so you guys are a Christian podcast, correct?
I mean, yes, very much. Like, we've had 8 episodes so far. We definitely there's a Christ foundation to the podcast, but we're talking a lot about conservative values, the family structure, effeminacy in the faith, and the sort of, I guess, the manosphere in general as well, but bringing a Christian twist to it. So I wouldn't say explicitly, exclusively
It's not like a theology podcast.
Yeah.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, you're metabolizing kind of secular concepts and trying
Exactly
to
right.
give them a Christian utilization.
Well said. I think it's needed, along
Exactly,
with,
yeah.
Will was a big inspiration in that as well, because he's the biggest, he's the juggernaut in the space. So I said, hey, I think there's a room for a few of us at this table,
We need 1,000 of us, like
Yeah.
just spreading it out, because
Yeah.
We need as many different, because every young man is going to connect to a different guy. Will told us this, coming from him. You got these different sort of archetypes, and they're like subtle analogs of what a masculine man is. And they're going to connect differently. And that might be, the secret sauce for one guy. And they're both saying the same thing, So it's cool. I agree. We need more.
Yeah, and the big thing too, I think, Will can agree, and a lot of the other men in the space, you guys as well, is that we're not trying to become cults of personality. Our whole thing is, we don't want to become that guy that's like, hey, get into our funnel. Let me shame you until you can get into our funnel. We can sell you something. It's like, you're right. Let us be the compass that points you to Christ. I'm just a man. And, if you relate to my message, great. But don't look up to me. Look up to Jesus, man. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
it's tough with the youngsters because they always like, even with Tates or like Zerkas or anybody like this, that age group, I feel like they're so ready to do the pedestaling. Like it's almost impossible to like get them not to do it on some like subconscious level. Like they want to do it.
They want to emulate someone.
Yeah.
Like physical that they can
For
watch, and it's like unfortunate. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of good examples of it.
Yeah.
Especially like I think there's a lot of good examples in the men's space. Like especially when you look at like Jordan Peterson's and a lot of what's going on. The women's space, so I think is what's lacking.
vacuumous.
It's
nobody.
like unfortunate.
Yeah.
And they got the pop culture examples for women. They are really unfortunate.
It seems like they need it even worse than we do, if that was possible. But
there are actually lots of really good examples. They're just not on Twitter, and they're not on YouTube, but on Instagram. I did a conference, the digital conference, the second edition. Mike spoke at the first one. I did in the second edition, which was back in May, June, I think, was all women. And it's 7 content creators, all of whom are on Instagram. They have very small or non-existent Twitter profiles, no YouTube pages, but they crush on Instagram.
They do pretty. Like, what do you think? Because like we've had Martine on and stuff. Like, there's definitely some good women out there, but it's like it's hard for them to gain a following. I feel like
to go mainstream,
to get like a huge. I feel like the men have a better chance on like really gaining an audience, but maybe I'm wrong.
I mean,
maybe
women.
we've been living under a rock.
I think the competition is probably stiffer for men than it is for women, because women, just because there's so many of us that have been doing it for so long. Like the Renaissance of Men as a process, not just my brand, not my page, has been happening for 40 years. Like this dialogue has been going on for so long. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't start it. I just looked at all the different pieces of it and put it together into a story that I think fits the facts. But for the Renaissance of Women, which is its own process, that isn't much more than 3 or 5 years old. And so they don't really know what they're doing yet, but they have an advantage that women are much better at engagement and sharing than men are. So they're newer at it. But when one of them takes off, like look at Pearl. Like Pearl she's been at it for a while, but she's blown up in the past 3-4 months.
She's popular with it too. Like, I don't think Pearl's really like what we're talking about though. Like,
no, I know, but but I mean, just as
I'm talking like a girl that's like.
Her audience is probably mostly men.
She's like talking about like what true feminism is and like being a woman,
like
not being like a woman. Like
she's a female black pill that we don't need.
Yeah,
she like hates women.
I got love.
She's like
for
siding
her,
out. Forgive me, maybe I'm getting too polarized here, but it sounds like she's
go
like
for it.
just like women suck and the men poor. Like she's kind of.
We might be
a little grifty.
We might be chatting with her soon.
I love Pearl, and
So
she's a
we
great
should-
lady. Can't wait.
That was a great pivot, dude.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
super smooth.
Pearl.
But yeah, I kind of view it as like there's these definite black pill people, and my kind of like I just want to have conversations with them.
Yeah.
I don't really want to attack them, like
No.
because it's like you understand. Like I understand what they're doing, and there's a grift behind it in some cases, and I think I I view it as like we might be getting to chat with Zerka at some point. I'm sure you've seen him blow up recently, and it's like, yeah, he's a problematic person for the Christian community, especially when he's claiming Christ. But I want to have a conversation with him and try to steer him in a better direction than just make videos attacking him. Because
Absolutely.
that's so much.
Yeah.
That's so easy to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think the best conversations are when you don't agree with somebody and you're learning and you're kind of like sparring. Like no one wants to hear us just agree all night. I'll be like, dude, you're awesome, and I'm well, no, you're actually more awesome, bro. No, dude, I said it first. It's like, come on, like we need to talk about some real stuff here, and those are the conversations when you learn.
I agree.
I'm
Yeah.
all for it. I'm not trying to hate on nobody. Everyone knows I ain't the brightest tool shed in the
tool.
kit. That's right.
Brightest tool shed.
This rocket
Maybe-
scientist, baby.
That's probably a good transition
Like I
to your
said.
question.
Okay, first question. This is aimed at Mike. The red pill. Is it a useful tool for Christian men in general? If so, how? If not, why?
Great question. I think the red pill is very useful if you apply a Christian worldview to it, right? I think what the red pill gets right in a lot of, sexual dynamics, relationship dynamics. The problem is I think they look at it purely from a biological standpoint. They treat themselves as just, biological animals, just, without spirits, just negating the whole spiritual concept of it, right? I think it's really important for men to take those concepts and see, okay, the concept of frame, the concept of leadership, the concept of, I guess, outcome independence. You see a lot of men in the Christian space and get into these marriages, and they're just weak, spineless men that can't lead themselves, let alone another woman. So I think, it can be very, very useful. I think not when taken to its extreme, because there's aspects of it that I really don't like. I don't think a Christian man has much use for the spinning of plates or dread game, stuff like that. I have a real problem with. I mean, and if, I'm sure you guys know what.
No, yeah. Those kind of prescriptive efforts they put to try and put the spine back in a man.
They're not prescriptive.
No, they're proxyological.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a praxeology. You're like,
No, better back up on that, son. They both start with P's, but they're different.
And yeah, I would. I guess before we comment on it, I guess Will, you could give your kind of take on it too.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as what are the downstream consequences of the root of your worldview. So if you want to root your worldview in evolution, right? That's why things are the way they are. So that's what we should go back to. Well, if you run that all the way down to the level of individual behavior and making moral choices, evolution can't give you a proper framework to make moral choices. And this is where a lot of the red pill guys kind of go wrong, is they avoid rooting in Christ, they avoid rooting in God, and so they want to root it in evolution. But that's shifting unstable sands. But they can't put it in God, because that would mean they have to repent and they have to confess sin and they have to give up their funnels that are made up of like selling fornication techniques and game and stuff like that. So they have this really brokenness at the core of the worldview that they can't actually acknowledge. And so that's what I tend to push on. Yes, so, you can go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted you to elaborate. I was just going to kick another question down your way to keep you elaborating. So continue. Please.
Oh, sure. So this is where the red pill frame game guys kind of go wrong. It's like, okay, like where do you get your ideas from? Where do you get your authority from? And they don't have a good answer for that. And they really don't like it when you point that out to them. They hate it. And the thing is, we're not going to get anywhere unless we properly root our philosophy, our theology in the right place. There's no place to push back from other than God. And so that's where I tend to start, and why I think the red pill leads men down wrong paths, because it's improperly rooted in false understanding of reality.
Wonderful. So like, say a Christian man, very well said. So a Christian man comes across red pill content. How does he apply, what portions of it, after doing your due diligence, do you think are advantageous to apply for a Christian man?
I mean, I think it's important for men to understand the idea of hypergamy. I think that's important, but there's nothing unbiblical about that. This idea that women are trying to get the strongest and best provider that they can. I don't think that that's false. Now, what I say in response to that is like, yes, all women are like that, but that's not all they are to women. That's not all there is to women. They're not walking hypergamy computers, right? Which the way the red pill kind of frames them as sometimes. But to understand that, wow, if you want to get a better woman, be a better man. Praise God and hallelujah. That's all throughout the Bible. That's Proverbs, right? Just alone. So I think if a man comes across the red pill and discovers this idea that, yeah, men are looking for strong, good, capable providers, if he has not encountered that in his church, right, which is a tragedy that that's even the case, but that's another conversation, then I think he could walk away like, oh, that's what women are looking for, not the nice, soft pushover guy that the pastor told me or that my dad told me. So I think that's a practical idea. But
I
again,
mean, we
like
say
Mike
that
said,
the red pill, the Bible is the original red pill. I mean, if you really read it and take it in and absorb the material, and you're reading about these stories, especially in the Old Testament, I mean, it's all there. So
yes.
And that's why I think some like the data and the empirical data side of the red pill is useful for men, because it reaffirms the Bible. It reaffirms the standards that the Bible sets on relationships that they're true, and it just strengthens my faith in the end.
So you're saying these sort of the biological description of the differences between man and woman and the motivations that are kind of set in biologically speaking, they're sort of in the background for a lot of Christian men. The red pill could pull that forward to help them become more aware of the dynamics and be a better husband, provider, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, the church has absolutely abdicated on talking to men and women, for that matter, about things like sex, fitness, the body, health, money, entrepreneurship, death, all these things that are everyday present realities. The church has decided over the past, as far as I can tell, 50 years, that we're just not going to talk about those things. They're still part of God's created order. So if you're not going to find honest discussions of these subjects in your church, you're going to find them somewhere else. And that's not a problem, except that what ideology comes along with that.
Yeah, and I think that, like, as far as why I titled the podcast, is a lot of men are coming from a feminine environment in the church, and so it's like they get led. Like, I mean, I kind of grew up in that circumstance where you don't really get like an understanding of human nature or relationships. Well, it's kind of like a Disney fairy, like the blue pill. It's totally blue pill in most churches, I think. And so a lot of men, then it's like if they don't get on the, like, I got married at 20 years old boat, then they end up finding the red pill, which is usually leads them down wrong paths, I think. Yeah. But overall, I think the data, like the information, can be used very productively. And that's why I really like to distinguish between the red pill and the manosphere. Because I view the red pill as like, here's the truth about human nature and like the reality of how we operate, our motivations and stuff, which is very useful. And then here's the manosphere with people building prescriptions and opinions off that. And so that's kind of where I view the clown show truly is. But yeah, I guess I'll let you go, Mike, on what you're kind of thinking on that.
I think the church has failed in so many ways. You said it right. They've completely avoided these topics, and particularly, like, they've completely glossed over the masculinity of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's this simpy beta, turn the other cheek, weak version of Jesus.
It's only the servant side of Christ they focus on.
It's not the savage, right? And he was very much the savage servant leader, right? And touching upon how masculine it was that he showed the restraint that he did while being guided up to the cross, that he could have just eviscerated his enemies and decided not to, that he flipped the tables in the temple. We all know this stuff, right? Because we're well read in those areas. We don't gloss over those areas. But going back to the red pill for a second, I when I think about the positive aspects, I don't know if it's so much red pill content as it is just general self-improvement, right? Get in the gym, get jacked, get strong. I mean, that's not exclusive to red pill, right? If you have if you already have a job, establish a side hustle, get yourself financially independent and free to some degree, be decisive, have a spine. Those are not exclusive to the red pill, I would necessarily say. But, where is a man going to find this stuff? Well, a lot of it is packaged all in one in this sort of red pill space that I think it's sorely needed for Christian men nowadays, because the guys that I coach, man, like, the marriages that they're trying to lead. I mean, a lot of times you get really deeply contentious women. That's a whole different topic, right? I mean, the church has also completely glossed over the reality of female sin too, right?
Yeah, women sin.
They don't sin, dude. What are you talking about?
They're all rainbows and butterflies and everything that's nice.
Yeah, I heard they don't even poop, dude.
Yeah.
They don't even poop. Not at all.
They fluff, bro.
Nope.
They fluff. They don't poop, dude. Come on.
Let's be real, dude. They're more evolved, bro. Closer to the angels.
Yeah. God, man. And that's another problem. It's just the church has become effeminate and feminist, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I got to admire my ortho bros. They seem to be out of, I guess Protestants, Roman Catholics, I guess out of the three, they seem to be the most, they hold strong to their tradition. I can certainly admire.
Because they have tradition.
They hard.
Yeah, they actually do have it.
Yeah, we got a bro Anton. Shout out to Anton. He's Greek Orthodox.
What up?
Hardcore.
Yeah,
not Greek Orthodox.
Well, quick little story about
Russian.
that, just to back up your sort of what you've observed with the Orthodox. So Anton, he's kind of moved around a lot. He was part of our Bible study for about 2 or 3 months, and then he was going to move out to Arizona. And so we've had guys leave before, and usually when they leave, we like to, say, hey, become part of a church or do something, try and get rooted when you go out, because it's going to be really rough when you're alone.
And so he hooked up with an Orthodox church, and of every single example of person that we've seen kind of shove out of the nest and go find a new place, he grew the most.
Explosion.
He exploded.
Like,
And so shout out to the Orthodox church. They're doing something right there.
Dude,
you know, they
they're
do
hardcore,
great.
bro.
Yeah.
But I definitely see like overall traditional sway going back to like fundamentalism. Like it's definitely happening. Like Will talks about this, and kind of like the death of what do you say? What do you say, Will? The death of red pill, or and then
the death of the manosphere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's
Yeah.
like they're going. Everyone's funneling towards like traditional values. Like we've had our fun in the sun with all this whack craziness. Now we're like, well,
Yeah.
we're crazy and lost. Let's go back to fundamentals. Let's try to find out what's going on here. You know.
Well, they
And I
were
think, like,
the thing. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Will.
Well, the problem with the manosphere is that it grew out of the pickup era. So all the foundational red pill dogmas of the manosphere came from the pickup era, where you had all these guys going into nightclubs and picking up girls and writing thousands of field reports, what they called field reports, all over the world. And so they would compile them on these websites like SoSuave, et cetera. That's where Rollo Tomassi got his start, was on SoSuave. So all these guys are reading all these field reports. They called it the largest sociological experiment ever conducted. So they, from looking at these, like, well, when women say they want one thing, they want men to be soft and sweet and nice, but when we show up in clubs and I'm put on our characters of debonair and dashing and aggressive, like women really respond to it sexually. What's going on? Oh, feminism is a lie. So that all flowed out of the pickup era. No one knew it at the
Hard
time.
hidden line there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing though, is it surfaced the original distinction that there's a difference between what women say and what women do. Often there is. And so they discovered that. So those doctrines flowed into the red pill, right? Now, what also flowed into the red pill was the idea of not being yourself, of being a character, because all the pickup guys were characters. Mystery was personas, exactly, who weren't their real selves. So when they tried to get into, and you can read The Game by Neil Strauss, and you can see
that's a wild book.
Never
these
worked.
guys are a mess.
You can't keep it going long term, baby.
Yeah,
You're gonna run out of tricks. Your Barney bag's gonna be full of nothing after.
You're like a method actor
like,
that
oh,
just went crazy.
You really
You
are.
guys
the
remember
talent.
Real Social Dynamics, like how degenerate those guys were too? RSD.
Nope.
know.
We didn't
I
get
don't
into
know
we,
that
one.
we
I heard
Joe and I are late.
What is
bloomers
that,
in the
Mike?
red pill.
What- I'd
Yeah,
love to hear.
just another
Degenerative?
group of pickup artists, and it was really, they had it down to I guess somewhat, you could say a science, and they would film hours and hours of videos of them on the streets. I mean, to me, it seemed like, it's harassment. A lot of those guys were very, very successful, but it was very, very much like this cult group of guys. It was between, I guess, 2010, 2015, I guess, when this stuff was at its apex. You know what's crazy about this stuff, and I talk about a lot on Instagram, is these guys want to preach, discipline and self-control and being a strong man and frame and all these things. But, when they get a little tingly sensation in their peepees, they can't help but touch themselves or, go fornicate with a woman. It's just so backwards, it's
No strength.
and now you see them fragmenting apart because a tree by its fruit, and the fruit is rotten.
Yep.
So none of these guys can get along because they're all trying to sell different forms of the same bullshit, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
None of them can agree, and they're essentially wiring themselves for extinction. I mean, you guys saw that 10-point list that went viral of Rollo Tomassi. Get a vasectomy, dude.
Chop them off, fellers. You don't need them. Yep.
But that's the same manifestation. Is that Rollo Tomassi is not his real name. How many guys navigating through the manosphere do not use their real names?
Didn't know that.
Some of them are, that's Rollo Tomassi is the name of the villain character, the fictitious villain character in the movie L.A. Confidential.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So that's where that came from. And so there are lots of guys through the manosphere that are not using their real names. Jack Donovan, that is not his real name, right? So what the manosphere borrowed was the idea of characters, right, or archetypes that each man in the manosphere embodied, and so different men gravitated to different archetypes, right? But that's not who these guys really are. They were always playing characters. And so now, as you have this influx of real men using their real names and their real faces and their real families, it's really changing things in uncomfortable ways. And when you root that to faith and a commitment to truth, no lie can stand up against the truth. And so the manosphere is struggling to figure out, how are we going to continue pretending when this guy named Andrew Tate used his real face and used his real name and did all the things that we've only talked about for 10 years? So like Andrew Tate is the apex of the manosphere and he's the end of it. because everyone will
He
be
does. He
compared
won't
to-
even claim to be in it.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but they try to claim him in it all
Well,
the
that goes
time.
with what you're saying, Will. It's kind of the decline. It's like their
Yeah.
head dude's
Yeah.
like, kind of screw this. I'm going with Allah.
Yeah.
How about that, guys?
the
Jumping
best.
ship, y'all retards can go down.
he was paid. He was paid to do that.
Oh, for sure.
He was paid. He's got no conviction.
Taliban
Do
giving
you
them
think
millions.
he really has $250
Talent.
million, or maybe not?
I believe he's exceptionally wealthy for sure.
Okay. Yeah,
That
there's
guy,
a
that
lot
guy
of
is a cult of
dudes-
personality of he's one of the most Googled people in history. There's no doubt that he's exceptionally wealthy, but that guy has got if you've listened to him on Patrick Bet David or any of these bigger podcasts, when he talks about his faith, it's very,
It's a social club.
yeah, he sounds like a theist, but he doesn't really know where he is, right? It's just, okay, I'm going over here because this kind of fits my lifestyle a little bit better. If that's even the case, if he's even truly Muslim, I think that he was paid. There's no
Paid
conviction
him.
in his words at all.
Who paid Tate? Yeah, let's hear more about this weird idea.
I mean, I don't know, dude. I'm literally, this is just me throwing stuff out there, but
Well, Will.
So the Muslims like, we need our superhero. We're gonna
Essentially.
pay
Oh
one.
yeah, some sheiks like, Dad, I'm gonna give you another 100 billion. Come on over. That's
Wow.
what happened.
I probably
Some
I have
good old
a,
old
I have a
money,
bit of
baby.
a different opinion on it. I think because I've listened to people that know him talk about it, and I think in my impression, I think they became theists, and then it was kind of like they have kind of like the all roads lead to God thing, and it's like, well, Islam is like Christian Western countries are falling into like pride flags and stuff on their churches, so I'm going to pick this one that seems to still have its act together. I don't think it was they weren't picking out a truth by any means. I think if you challenged them on it, they wouldn't even have any idea how to argue it.
Is
But
Andrew
Tate's
Tate
just
'cause
happy
I
to
was
go to a
listening-
religion where he can have multiple wives.
Well,
I
did
don't
you
even
see that he
know if
deleted
he's
that
going
picture?
down that route. But I was listening to one of their.
What's that, Mike?
no, sorry to interrupt, man. He deleted a picture off his Twitter today. There was that picture of like the Crusader, and I think it was
that one.
he was next to a Muslim, and they were looking at each other, and they said together, and in front of them is feminists and the pride flag and whatever, and in the back was a giant caricature of, I guess, a Jewish person, and above him was the Star of David. And so when somebody said, "Hey, squint, look above the guy," he deleted it promptly.
Be like, yeah, and you lost the Crusades, by the way.
Deus Vult.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, well, it's such a false, I think their depiction of Christianity, their whole view of it is Twitter. And, Twitter Christianity is people posting these pride churches and stuff, and that's their whole view of it. Because there's a lot of, woke preacher clips and stuff I've seen. They post this nonsense of that is going on in church, and it does look bad, but that's not the full reality, and that's what they paint it out to be.
Yeah, it's hyperbolic. It sucks.
Well, when you choose the worst elements of a faith to represent the entirety of the faith, yeah, we can play that game, right?
We can
Let's do that. Let's
Hit it, Will.
let's go.
Let's hear the worst hits album.
Will's coming with machete.
Well, I mean,
Guys,
I have
if
to
you
deal with
haven't
this being
listened
Protestant.
to, sorry, Will, Jeff Durbin of Apologia. You go to his church, right?
Yeah.
He had that debate with Dr. James White and Reverend Brendan Robertson. If you guys haven't checked that one out,
Is that the gay pastor?
that's the gay pastor.
I did
Dude, if you
watch
wanna-
that.
Oh, man,
That was just
brutal.
I was frustrating to just listen to the gymnastics being done there by that guy.
Poor
That's
guy.
gross.
That's
like Olympic level gymnastics, not just gymnastics at a base level. That was an Olympic level.
If there was any pastor could do Olympic gymnastics, it would be a gay one. So at least he's doing that,
Year of hurt feelings rolls on.
We're only 28 minutes in, and dude, we're gonna get canceled.
we got canceled on that one.
Getting loosened up.
Love that.
I guess my question is so many men are growing up in this blue pill church environment, and it's kind of like, what do you guys view as the answer to this problem? Because in my case, I found the red pill, and a lot of the guys we know, they would consider themselves red pill guys, and they have no interest in sleeping, being promiscuous. They have no interest in emulating some of these characters that are in the manosphere. But it's the only place that they can get this information that's useful in today's especially kind of nonsense dating world. It's so church is not teaching you how to mate select at all. You have no idea how to properly vet a woman. Is this woman have a real relationship with Christ? You don't learn any of this stuff. And it's like, well, what is the answer for these men then? It's like, can you go change the churches on this topic? Probably not. So then is the answer like we just need 1,000 of us on Instagram making content and hope they find it?
I think they got it. Like Mel. Remember Mel?
Yeah.
She's like, dudes, and they don't date. They're literally like spiritually autistic and like really autistic. Like they can't even like date and talk to a woman.
Yeah.
Like they don't know how to do it because they're not allowed to, and they're not allowed to like do any of this stuff. So like, what do you guys think about like
how do we solve
and then
this?
they get the red pill, and then they go like full narcissist, and they're like, oh, screw
They
this.
might not, but it's not even like they do that either. It's just unfortunate that they have to go to the red pill and some of these manosphere creators to get that information, and not like at church, because like it's not like I don't think many of these men that are Christian and legit Christian are going to the red pill and being corrupted really by it. Like maybe they get a little bit black pill in their view of women, but I don't think they're turning into promiscuous Andrew Tates wanting 4 wives. I don't see that really happening.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, for the
Christian
Christians
men?
specifically.
Oh, with Christians?
Yeah, he's talking
Yeah,
about
like-
Christians, not like everybody.
Like our Discord's full of men that would consider themselves red pill men, and none of them are living that way. And they,
Okay,
I mean, they'd
thinking,
have to
like-
leave their faith if they were.
yeah.
You know,
But I'm
so-
thinking like I do see a lot of like red pillars.
Well, yeah, but we're talking Christian ones that.
Oh, there's
find
tons
the
of
red pill.
secular ones that are just
important distinction. Important.
But yeah, so what do you think about that?
Mike, you
What
want
do
to go
we
first?
do?
I mean, I'm trying to do that now with Instagram and Twitter and the podcast and now my YouTube channel. And I just think there's got to be more voices, because trying to influence the church, there's a couple of levels, right? So you get the guys that are the Jeff Durbins and the Vody Bauchams and the Michael Fosters and all these great, theological minds. But I don't think they speak to, Joe in Missouri who's trying to court a woman, right?
Yeah.
They're incredibly intelligent men, theological geniuses, weapons of the faith, but they're not speaking to those men. So I just think we need more men at this sort of base level, basic guy like me, who's got a family, who did the thing, who lived the red pill degenerate lifestyle, that's turned his life around, gave his life to Christ, and says, okay, well, this is what I think you should do. Don't do it that way. And there's just got to be many more examples of that. Because what's amazing about an identity in Christ is that having that accentuates the unique gifts you already have. You don't become a caricature of another man. And that's what the manosphere, that's what they do, right?
Well, I'm going to stop you right there and play some devil's advocate, because those Christians would be like, yo, Mike, you already did all easy for you to say, you saw all the titties, bro. I don't want to hear about this. I never even been on a date before. Like, shut the hell up.
Fair
So,
point.
like, that's going to happen. And we're like, what do you tell a guy that can't even go on a date when he's 16 for fear of like sprouting a boner or something, having a sexual thought? I don't know. It's like these guys, that's how hard the blue pill is on them. Like, how do they get experience dating if you don't date?
Will, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple questions wrapped up in there. Like you mentioned you want me to answer the question for the 16-year-old guy who doesn't know how to date? Because I would prescribe different advice for different men dealing with different problems at different stages of their life.
I think probably a better place to start would be the guy that says, well, it's easy for you to say, like, you went through a bunch of women and now it's like, I want it. A lot of guys will be like, I'll go through that myself and damage because it's fun, and then I'll come to Jesus later. Like, I could see guys
like, I'll walk through that fire.
Yeah, I'll walk through that
sounds like a
fire.
great
Like,
fire.
and you gotta I think I don't know how to have that conversation with them.
So as a man who walked through that fire naively, like I didn't know better. Like I've been legitimate, like morally, spiritually, physically dangerous situations, right? And so like I wasn't Christian, I wasn't raised Christian. I didn't think that anything that I was doing was wrong morally at the time. So a man who's making that calculation saying, well, I'll just do it, and he knows it's wrong, is going to face a very different situation than me. And now for someone like me, and presumably someone for like Mike, like praise God, he saved me. I thank him every day, every meal, every night before I go to bed on my knees. I thank him for saving me. I don't deserve to be here. And I don't want any man to have to experience that. And the only thing that I can do to redeem my past is warn as many men and women away from it as possible. To have, praise God, I kept my eyes open during the entire experience. So I can tell people in exquisite detail, as you guys saw from the presentation, why the New Age is wrong. right? Because I've been down to the bottom of that hole, right? That's just an example. So, what would I say to that young man? I get it. It hurts. You're in pain. You're curious. You want more than you've been given. And you look around and you see everyone around you prospering and lying in wickedness. Read Psalm 73, and you will see that the wicked are not in a good place. And
No.
I was not in a good place either. And so be grateful and stay in the shelter and on the righteousness of the Lord, and don't want what those other men have.
Yeah,
What about dating?
I'd also say like for some of the younger guys when they're in their teens, like to look at a woman and start to distinguish acknowledging beauty in somebody you're attracted to from lust, and having more of a refinement of the terms and the way that they're reacting to these terms and associating themselves with the terms, so they don't feel so sinful when they see a woman that they're attracted to, and they start to acknowledge there's a natural process here that can be good. Like there's a good version of this, and it's not always lust and you're condemning yourself by having these thoughts, because they're not being taught that in church. Like they holding hands, the way that they show affection to the opposite sex is so encumbered with this sinful act and, like battling away the lust and this and that. And rightly so, because we know lust is a very slippery slope. But at the end of the day, the truth is attraction between the sexes is a beautiful thing. And they need to understand that. They need to understand the nuance associated with having that for a wife and the courting, right? Managing it, being able to find their own romantic approach, which is kind of what we talked to Mel about, was like the spiritual sort of autism they have really has to do with them not exploring the romantic
They've never
responses
developed.
to women, and being able to say that some of this stuff is okay. Some of this stuff you're going to find your masculine spirit in. Some of this stuff that's exactly the way God meant it to be. But they're not being comforted in that exploration and guided in that exploration. Instead, it's just sort of you're under duress and you're sinful, and that's kind of the story I hear most often. And I feel that would help a lot of the younger guys explore that with some confidence for once.
Well, they don't have a father there to guide them through that. That's the big problem. Is a father supposed to be helping his son, and if a father can't help his son through the discovery of his own sexual desire and help guide his son on what that's for and what it's supposed to be applied to and what to do with all that excess energy, if you don't have a father there to do that, right? Then or a pastor who's willing to talk about it, you have a bunch of young boys who are effectively orphaned.
Yeah.
And so if there are young boys who are listening to this who are orphaned, find your way into a community of men like the ones here on this screen. And we can help shepherd you. We can help guide you, either from the perspective of men who are raised in the church like you guys were, or men who were not raised in the church like I was, or like Mike was, so that you get both ends of the spectrum. Like that's why we do this, because fathers and pastors have failed generationally. Like if the year of hurt feelings is about hurting red pill guys and feminists, like that's 2023, 2024 is going to be hurting the feelings of fathers, right? They need to hear it, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be ugly, but you know what? They got to hear it because we have to heal this. We're cleaning up a mess that 3 generations of men have left.
And ultimately, it's only men who can do it. When you look at a lot of the red pill sort of, passing the hot potato and trying to feel good about blaming women. I mean, we as Christians acknowledge that the hierarchy system put here by Christ is men lead. And so we have to acknowledge that we have failed. And we're going to be the only ones able to start this thing back on the right track. So we do have to take responsibility. That's
what
where it
about
begins.
Christian kids? Like dating in middle school. Are they allowed to do that? Are they allowed to date and like when they're younger, like get to have a girlfriend, give her a hug after school, write special notes to each other?
I would say absolutely not. I got a 2-year-old daughter and a baby that's going to come in the next 3-4 weeks. I would not raise them to be that way.
When would you let them start dating? And what would dating look like as a Christian father that has a straight up family in submission to Christ? What would that look like if you have a daughter? So I know it'd be different for a boy. So like what would that look like? Like when would you let her start like having a boyfriend or thinking about that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think about it all the time, and I struggle with how practically I'm going to do that because I'm a very protective.
Just
Because
reaching for the shotgun all the time. It's
oh
like,
man,
we're
I'm just
blow
gonna have
shit.
all of my most intimidating friends over. We're all gonna be in wife beaters, cleaning guns.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm
You know,
talking about, dude.
um,
That's awesome.
But when I think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, well, I'm going to teach her, don't go to university. That's not where your value, that's not where your time is supposed to be spent. Instead, in place, of course, if you want to work, for sure work, but your priority is to find, a man that's involved in the church, a strong man that's involved in the church, a man that's involved in the church that's actually a Christian and a strong, masculine Christian guy. I mean, whatever that looks like for a 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old man, I'm not sure, 25, I have no idea. But one that has his head on right, comes from a good family, and is ready to take on that provider protector role.
So you're going to have your eyes peeled for this guy.
Yeah, dude. And because this is my thing, right? My whole thing is, if my daughter wants to bring home a man that was like me when I was younger, then I've failed fundamentally. Yeah. And that's something that I think about a lot. So what that would look like was like, I want to meet this guy. He's going to come over, and you guys are really never going to really spend much time alone unless you guys are going on a date. Now, kids are going to find ways to do it. Even young people are going to find ways to do it if that's what they so choose. But what I really want to instill in my daughter is that her chastity is something to hold in incredibly high regard. That's good. That even not to just honor me, her father, her mother, above all, you're honoring Christ and honoring God by honoring your body and your chastity by waiting for your husband. That's what God would want you to do. And, God would want you to not be in the throes of a man that's trying to manipulate you. And so the upside to me going through this experience as a former red pill guy is I can kind of teach her the tricks, right? It's like, this is your nature. This is what you're going to be drawn toward, but avoid this. Don't just avoid this, flee this. And so if a man is genuine in his pursuit for you, like I was, for her mother, there are, yeah, JR is absolutely right. There are, what was I going to say there? Oh, yes. So going back to that, when I was courting her mom, there was a difference in how I approached her than I approached other women. There was I could see this future, and I proceeded with a completely different set of moral values. And it was
what informed that for you?
What informed that was she was very convicted by her faith. She actually was baptized before me. She went through a huge phase of being in the New Age and then came to Christ, the only Christian in her whole family, and her whole friend group, which I seriously admire even to this day. I come from a Roman Catholic family, so for me to say that I'm Christian, the only conversation there is, you don't pray to the saints, you don't believe in Mother Mary. Yeah. Well, for her to become a Christian, that's what a powerful proclamation of faith, and especially with the baptism. So when I saw that, and I saw her honoring her chastity in that way, and of course I tried to be a little slippery, but when I really sat down with her, I saw this genuine love for Christ. Because I've met some Christian women that are not Christian; they're just Christian by title. She was definitely walking in that way. I could see that in her prayer life, even things that, just waking up in the morning, I see her in the corner reading the Bible, praying, going to church by herself. There was all these indicators, right? All of these really positive green flags. And I'm like, okay, well, and I wasn't equipped to lead her in the faith at that time. But that's what at least was, those were indications to me that, okay, I got to proceed differently here. And maybe the way that I was doing it before was wrong. So I don't know if that answers your question. That was pretty much like a roundabout.
Well, it's kind of interesting, but when I'm hearing that, I can't help but draw a parallel to your daughter, right? This is a woman who's going to church, your wife, right? And she picks a non-believer or a Catholic. Very interesting.
I was Christian at the time, but I was behaving like a degenerate.
Well, I'm sure she knew that, but still she said, this guy. One thing I see, too, is that I try to get guys to understand this when they're going out trying to find a woman. It's like, you're going for the 28-inch golden trout, my friend, not the little bluegills that are everywhere. You could get them all day and night. You can have a nice fish fry, but it's not a golden trout. So you found one. You took a bite out of it. You're like, this thing is a legit golden trout coin. Like, this is the legit one. And that doesn't, you don't want to see them often. And that's my point. It's like a lot of the my question is, how did your wife, being a Christian and having this devotion to Christ, how did she justify you?
Great question. I get this asked a lot by women in my DMs.
She's still trying.
Oh, yeah. Well,
maybe number 2.
Well said. It
Work.
I love you, Mike.
No, dude, it's kind of true. No, it's funny. But when I think about it, at the time, at least the first, okay, so there was one, we dated for 2 months at the beginning of 2020. I broke up with her because I was still wanting to be a degenerate, but also there was a piece of, I am not worthy of this kind of woman. And this is why I speak so adamantly against the red pill. Is like, it's going to almost fundamentally teach you that you're unworthy of like genuine love from a woman. So when you meet this type of woman, you're going to want to flee from it because it's so unlike the other encounters that you've experienced before. So that was a big piece of it, especially those of us that have come from fatherless homes like myself. So how does she justify me? Well, she saw that, okay, I was in the faith, I was in pretty decent shape, decently charismatic guy. Okay, I got these things going for me from, I guess, like a secular worldview. Okay, these things are like higher status things. He's got a business. His life is moving ahead. He calls himself a Christian. What I think she saw without asking her was some real potential. She saw something in me that I don't think I even saw in myself at the time.
That's good. And so
That is scary, isn't it?
Well,
As a
I
man?
also girls like to fix guys.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing
Fix
too,
her
right?
upper, baby.
They want to make the badass into like it's like the Beauty and the Beast, right? And so funny, when we reconnected, 4 or 5 months later, and she was like, when I sat down with her on their first date, I said, this is going to be a great mother and a great wife. And it's all come true. Praise God. We got married within like 9 months of dating. Okay. So we reconnected 3 or 4 months later. I didn't want to be back with her. She didn't want to be back with me. I dragged her through the mud. I almost cheated on her a couple of times. I didn't, but I almost did a couple of times. One of which when I was leaving on my way out of church. I know how I didn't combust into flames, but we reconnected under the premise of, listen, I don't know anybody else in the faith. You're the only person that I know in the faith. Can we just take a walk and just talk about Christ? Because I'm sick and tired of living this life.
That's beautiful. And so was her dad involved with, or her mother? Was she just kind of alone? You said she went to church alone. So
Yeah,
did she
so,
like
okay.
live out of state from parents, or
Yeah,
were
so
they
she was
involved?
born in Lebanon and she was raised here in Alberta. And so she had moved to my hometown of Vancouver, Canada, to pursue like a scuba diving license. And she was, working over there. She just wanted to go over there. She was a
Free
traveler
spirit.
type of person. She just liked to see the world, and she ended up in Vancouver.
It's that new ager thing.
Yeah, she went through the New Ager thing, but then came to Christ a year before she moved to Vancouver, and then she found a church there, and she was alone. So her family wasn't involved in it, and her family are not of the faith. Her mom's
Wow,
side,
okay.
the Druze. I guess that's like a sect of like Islam. Her dad identifies as a Christian, but they weren't actively involved in the process.
Okay. Well, the
Would've been
reason
cool.
I love these stories, and I like to point these things out, because going for the golden trout sometimes is going to mean, listening to God. I'm sure she prayed about you a lot when she's
yeah.
like, this guy's he's not a believer. What am I going to do? And so some of these guys are like, she has to be a
He was a
Christian,
believer.
he told me he was kind of on the rocks. Like, he wasn't serious. He was
He
kind of
was
like
a degenerate
Catholic.
believer.
Yeah,
Yes.
we know what that is. We've all been there. But the truth is, a degenerate believer, you're either backslidden or you don't know God. It sounds like you met God after this. Like, you thought God was hanging around, but it's more of that superficial, like, God is there, but I can't talk to him every day, or he's going to accept me no matter what, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, God's, the imposition of a total God had not yet met you in the face, in the head, right? Until you saw her. And then she's like, whoa, this is who God. You saw God's character through her, and that's
Yeah.
like the wake-up call you needed. But so I just like to point these stories out for the guys because they're not ideal. You weren't this on-fire theologian guy. It sounds like you've stepped back stepped into the faith in about, what, 3 years or 4 years?
Yeah, I would say, really seriously, about a year, but it's been a couple of years. Let's just say 2 years, but really, really seriously in the last year.
Right. So, you're just in that sort of on fire, yippee, here we go, baptism, crazy, force of nature phase, which is good.
Fire.
We like
Will
to come.
too, right? You've been 3 years, right, Will?
Yeah, but it's like Mike, it's only really taken off in the past 18 months, year, something like that. Yeah.
This is great.
Men are woken up by battle. We know that. So you guys are kind of, you guys woke up into the thicket of it, which is
Right
good.
into the middle.
But yeah, wonderful story, and I appreciate the beauty in that. And I want the younger guys to understand that, so that they're not looking for this, equation, like this arithmetic equation of evaluating the perfect mate.
You're like, Susie had to be in church since she was 2 years old.
Yep.
She had to go to every Sunday school. Like, that doesn't have to happen for all these
Yeah.
guys. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't
This stuff
define-
drives me nuts. It's like the
Right.
red flags, green flag stuff.
Right.
You're like, first of all, bro, assess yourself, because you're not all green flags. And number two, and this is where I think a lot of Christian guys get lost in the weeds. God forbid she's got 1 or 2 red flags. I mean, I'm one of those people that regardless of anybody's past, if you're truly repentant, that doesn't mean you're obviously a virgin again, but to deny that denies the grace that Christ gives us, right? Obviously, we want to give ourselves the best opportunity at success. Don't go marry an OnlyFans model. Like, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying have a bit of grace for that person if she's not like the exact caricature of the trad white virgin frolicking in the garden barefoot in a dress. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Well, it
yeah.
also depends on where you're coming from too.
No,
like, if
absolutely.
you're-
Totally.
Like some of these guys that come like, well, I had all my fun when I was younger, and now I want to marry the tradcon, frolicking woman. It's like, well, buddy, like, good luck.
Yeah.
It's delusional. Like, you guys had something to relate. You guys are very relatable. Obviously coming from like different paths, but very passionate, like smart people that came into faith around the same time. There's a lot of relatability there that like you're talking about some guy with a degenerate lifestyle wants some kind of virgin. It's like, get real, bro. Like, you're going to have nothing in common with this person. Like, literally nothing.
And I'd like to point out, so as I'm learning some more of your story, you found Red Pill when you were in your degenerate phase. You kind of found it and used it to your advantage, kind of like the PUA. You were like, this is going to give me game. This is going to give me a sharp edge. I'm going to get what I want. So, like, that is definitely the case with the Red Pill when somebody secular kind of runs into it. I mean, it's kind of like the neo-Darwinist model. They're going to use it to their advantage in the most hedonistic way possible. That's all, the only option they really have. And you can't blame them for it because there's no outside enforcer of moral and ethical code. They have none. It's this relative morality that they're playing with, and they just have preference, and their preference is driving their decisions, and it's like that changes day to day. It's complete chaos, and that's why your life goes to shit. But if you're a Christian and you find Red Pill, like me and Joe, we were introduced to this by Mike. It was a very different experience. Very, very different experience because of what Will is explaining. There was a lens, there was a filter that all this stuff came through. I also was able to distinguish the very useful parts of it and come out of this, what I now see is what's really hurting the church, and that's the feminism of the church. And that was something that I was blind to.
I was so
and I was
blind to
fighting with one arm behind my back and trying to love women in a way that was doing them abuses. And to wake up out of that was like a feeling of like, when you have like a pain in your back, you just want to crack it and you just want to get that pain out, man. But it's like irking you and you're just kind of rubbing on something, trying to get it out, and finally pops. That's the way it felt. I was like, finally, I can tell where the battle is. I can finally put my thumb on this pressure point and say, this is what the church in the West needs. I can finally, it's not about theology in the way that, it's not about a TED Talk, it's not about being more on fire for God. All those things matter, but if it's misdirected, ultimately we're missing the mark. And so all that trickled down into Satan's plan for both the church and secular society, which is to destroy families. And he wants to take out the leader. He wants to take out the father. And so when you come to this knowledge, you're like, wow, we're in a dire state here. We have to be able to save these churches. We have to be able to be responsible to what God has now burdened us with, and that is a part of the gospel. So we've been trying to really think about, you go to a church and you express these things. How do we, I'd like to present this question to both of you, but masculine churches, from a Christ perspective, is gospel. But how do you provide that message in gospel, right? We're reading through all of the synoptic gospels. You read through Paul's letters. To try and pull that yarn, that little thread out, really let people focus on it is the job. Without them thinking that it's some secular red pill thing, or these guys are out of their minds with secular red pill or manosphere, because that's just a distraction. So how do you get them to focus on this being gospel? This is gospel, without pointing to the red pill and pointing to the manosphere, because I fear that is what will make them more skeptical of our message, because ultimately it's gospel. We don't need the red pill. We don't need the manosphere. We don't need any of that. We just need the gospel. And so how do we narrow it down and distill it with the word that we have? Have you guys thought about that?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what your position is in the church that you're a member of. So the first thing that any average church-going guy can do is embody meaning like in his physical body and in his posture and in his attire and in his speech, the masculine values that he espouses, like be the guy and study your Bible daily, right? And look like you guys and train and do all this stuff. Be the guy who's incorporated the things that you've learned from the secular world that it has right, and incorporated it into your faith, right? Put those two pieces together in your
I
body
agree.
first and foremost, right? That's one. But the second problem is to recognize that your church might not like it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that. And so that may potentially lead to downstream consequences, right? You may have to leave your church. You may have to go find another church that a man like you would feel comfortable in, because masculine authority in its very body and its very presence and posture and tone is a threat to feminine authority. And it sees it and it seeks to eliminate it and remove it because it sees it instantly, and the churches are captured. And if you walk into a feminine church as a masculine man, right, you might not be invited back. You may find that you're the subject of gossip or slander or whatever, right? And can you do anything about that? Well, unless you're the pastor of the church, you probably can't. And so I think that you'll find a lot of men. What you may do is you may find men like, well, I want what that guy's got. And you may begin having some influence in a small and meaningful way. You may be invited to participate and help in the church as well. So I don't want to say that there's a definite path, but it really depends on how feminist your church is, right?
How do people that's a great question. So we were talking to Mel, and she gave us a very different analysis of the church in the south of California. And to be honest, with the three of our jaws hit the floor, she's like, you know what? It's actually pretty great over here. And we were like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe because you're in the south of California, you're getting
Skeptical
persecuted.
face.
What?
Yeah.
Skeptical face.
Yeah, exactly, bro. We didn't know what to
Exactly.
make. We were just taking her at her word. Okay, I've never been there, so I'm not. I mean, immediately we're kind of skeptical, but because we're like, we come from the south. We talk to people in the Midwest. It is feminized to the core, to the marrow,
And obese.
and
Right.
obese. We got a lot of fatties, but this is our condition. So to hear her say that, and I was like, we heard it, but it was very strange because you brought up the point is how feminized. We got this barometer of feminine, sort of disease. How would you say to somebody who's blind, right? Like me, a year and a half ago, blind. I'm hearing these guys talk about it. What would be some some cues I could look at and be like, okay, this church, this is not a masculine church. It's not running properly. We got the fuel to air ratio is
You just
messed
said
up.
it. You go walk in with good posture and with
See
a
what happens.
decent tone of voice and see what happens.
Well, I mean, there's got to be more than that.
yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah.
got to be more than that. I mean, like people are going to look at you that way. If you're taking care of yourself, you're going to
Dude,
get a little bit.
masculine knows, monkey see, monkey do. I mean, at
There's
the end of
that.
the day, if
Well, I
like,
mean,
you're-
okay,
if
so
your
one
preacher-
thing. I'm trying to give guys some easy stuff here. I mean, I get that, but like if there's a woman preacher, right?
Oh, yeah. Just run. Just
Okay.
run.
Yeah.
out the door.
Exit.
Right. Okay. All right. Another thing.
Where did that come from?
been
Iron
working
Maiden?
all night for-
Go.
Run to the. Okay, so does anybody have any other ones? I mean, these are things that slip under people's radar. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of some of these younger guys who've grown up in this. They got blinders on. These are things that are very difficult to identify.
What? Go ahead. Will.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I mean, first of all, I've been to so many churches because I was, when I was in Vancouver, it was like the left coast, right? It was almost impossible unless I drove out to rural areas to find a church that wasn't preaching an effeminate gospel. Like, what are the pastors teaching? What are they preaching about? Are they just, pontificating about social issues and not bringing it back to scripture? That's bad. Okay. Are they keeping it in scripture and speaking against these social issues with like an iron spiritual fist? Now that's something to look at. That's the church where I'm at right now, Christ City. When I walked in, I think a lot of people walk in not really thinking about what the pastor's actually saying. I think people are going to church legalistically, ticking off the box. I went with my family to church and off I go to brunch after. What is the pastor actually talking about? Is he touching on any of these topics? Is he talking about the LGBTQ pride agenda? Is he talking about these, what was that church like during COVID? That's a pretty huge litmus test too, right? My church stayed open, didn't enforce masks. They talk about all of these issues. But what I loved about my church is that the pastor, he kept it rooted in scripture. It wasn't him just going off, right? So I think if you look at any of these powerful pastors that we're talking about, yes, they have their own message that they convey sometimes, but the 99% of what they're speaking about is rooted in the gospel. I think that's the number one thing.
Great.
And how do these men speak? What are their tonalities? What are their own? What do their families look like? What do the people in the congregation? What do their families look like? Are there masculine men at the church?
Right. And to your point about the this is the second. It's great you brought that up. The messages. We talk a lot about how the pastors, they will treat the men in a very, very just general way. You guys suck. You need to man up, and then the women are always doing great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no balance of the features of the real struggles that women deal with, and addressing like a sermon, like a full blown sermon, out against what the women deal with, and like some of the more tender issues that no one's going to talk about, like are you weaponizing sex against your husband, say, you know, some of these rampant issues in the church that we're not hearing about. So if you're not hearing those sermons, it's because your pastor's probably afraid, or he has no idea to make a sermon.
Yeah,
like
and I would
that.
say one of my things would be silence says a lot. What are they silent about? What is there? Zero sermons on, you know, these different topics, LGBT, maybe it's abortion, maybe like I wouldn't say they need to have like a sermon on abortion or LGBT, but it's like, what are their stances on it? Do they just completely avoid it? Because I think just silence speaks a lot. And like you
Silence
said,
is an
some
answer.
of these feminist issues, like if they're not even going to address them, like it says a lot.
And so, like I tell the guys, like if you have a problem in your church, you don't just bounce, right? You go talk to the pastor and you say, I think we need to hear about this. What do you feel? I've been coming for a year.
Feel
and
like
we
you
haven't
should
heard
leave
anything.
now.
Right. So if he says you should leave, then you leave. But if there's a, oh, really? Because, you know, we have to approach this with grace and mercy the way, like think about how much mercy, grace that Jesus had with the Pharisees, the men who knew everything, the whole Bible, but could not see the woods from the trees. So instead of just saying, oh, we're out of here, go talk to the elders in the church and say, you know, is this an issue you've thought about? If not, will you deal with it? And if you just want me to leave, I will leave.
I'm feeling like this place is a brood of vipers, and don't really want to bring my family.
Bunch of whitewashed tombs in here.
Whitewash too.
Just throw down the gauntlet.
Dry bones.
Thought about bringing my hand-carved whip today, but I decided
braided 3.
yeah.
No, I like what you, Mike, I like what you said about silence, right? Like, I think that's really important. And there's a great book. I just had this guy on my podcast, Zach Garris, who wrote the book Masculine Christianity. And I think what we're seeing throughout the church is decades of really poor teaching. Like that's what Reformed theology is really good about. Reformed churches are really good about getting very clear on salvation by faith alone, through grace alone, you know, in Christ alone, sola scriptura. They're really good about pushing that. So getting really clear on the doctrine. But a church that's really clear on doctrine and really clear on expositional preaching and really clear on politics and really clear on culture, are they still not able, or are they able to plug in what the Bible says about men, women, and families? Are they willing to take that last step and say, this is what men and women are for? And you'll find a lot of churches that are very strong theologically, very strong on doctrine, politics, and culture, and they're very strong on talking to men. They will hold back the sharp point of talking to women. They're like, you know, wives, submit to your husbands, and now moving on to men.
Right.
And it's like, unless you're willing to take that last step, and that last step is going to be taken at some point in the next couple of years, and it's going to be ugly, and a lot of churches are going to explode, because they will see just how deep the feminist rot has run. And I'm really hoping to avoid that. Churches will avoid that. But, you know, really the feminist demon, the feminist spirit. I just had Rachel Wilson, who wrote the book Occult Feminism. Right? This was a great book. I just finished a podcast with her a couple hours ago, about an hour ago, actually. And when you see the occult roots of feminism, and you understand that it's a spiritual virus, a spiritual weapon, it is a spirit, and it has crept into men and women, and it kind of lives in their hearts. And when you call it out for what it is, and you confront it with the light of the masculine gospel, it can hide. But when you actually show when you start talking sincerely about submission and headship and women remaining silent in church and she'll be saved by childbearing, when you start talking through these issues, the Bible, is very clear. That's when it gets squeezed out, and then you start to see it, right? And so that's going to happen. And so, can you do anything about that now? No, but you can be well read. You can be forewarned as forearmed, right? And you can see that, and you can just trust that God will lead you where you need to be. But are you going to be able to do that within your existing church? Probably not. But again, you can be the guy, and you can know the truth, and you can read the Bible, and you can be prepared if you need to make a jump from a church that's not willing to take that last little step. And I believe that God will catch you if you have to jump, that you will find the place to go where the guys are like, the pastor and the community is like, no, we are about that life. We are about the Christian life. And I think those
Part of me thinks that Paul, like, he preached in the synagogues till he was thrown out.
That's right.
Like we need a little moxie when it comes to like persisting in a church that's willfully blind, and like, when you talk to a girl when you're young, your first girlfriend, you're right about something, you get in a fight with her, and then she starts to cry, and then all of a sudden you feel bad for her, and you're like, you know what, it's okay,
Game
like
over.
whatever.
Game over.
It's like that is what
She
we're
started
caught
crying.
in all the time. It's like, yeah, they're gonna cry, it's gonna look horrible, they're really cute, they got beautiful eyes, and you feel horrible because they're a small little beautiful creature crying, and you're just like, okay, it's my fault, yeah, we'll just end this, and I feel like we do need to be a little bit more like hard-nosed Paul's, not in the way that we're debasing or speaking like trashing people, not with frustration, not with any of that, but to persist until you're thrown out. I feel like a little bit of that would be great too in the church, to be like, if the truth is on your side and there's one of you in that church, like, how big is your God? I believe you can change things, like have a little bit of that.
Well, the one thing that you mentioned earlier, Mike, that I really liked was how you viewed raising your daughter. And if, like, what you said on, like, not sending her to a public university and whatnot, stuff like that would get so much pushback, I think, in a lot of churches today. We actually had that. We got pushback from a pastor. One of my friends was telling me that watched our podcast. It was actually last time with you on, Will, and I had made some statement about, like, basically my view of, like, if I had a daughter, I would raise her to be a mother and wife and, like, not focus on her career and support her till she found a man that could support her, essentially.
That's it.
And so that was my view on it. And, like, I had this pastor upset with that view. And, like, I'm sending my daughter to college. And so, like, that would be a huge
sending her to
sign
public
me is
university.
what are these, the leadership of the church, how are they raising their children? Are they is the church producing wives and mothers that or are they producing career boss babes that will then run into epiphany stage at 30 to be a wife and mother?
Yeah.
That's good, Mike.
Yeah.
Dude, imagine going into a church and saying, hey, wives, you signed that document, you married your husband, right? You're supposed to submit to him regardless of his performance.
That.
Do you really believe that, though? I mean, like, that's something we have to kind of preface on when we tell people, like, should she submit if he's not in submission to Christ? I mean,
no,
the gospel's clear about that.
The gospel is very clear about that. It's adultery and apostasy, essentially, right? And so I look at it like this: if you're not submitted to Christ and you're abusive, you're an apostate.
Well, there's actually a verse about this.
Well,
Right.
because I mean, you have to think.
Bring it up, Will.
If the woman is first in submission to Christ and her husband is not in submission to Christ, then by de facto of the hierarchy of commitment, she shouldn't be submitting to an idiot husband. But I mean, the qualifier.
I know what verse he's going to bring up on this.
Oh,
What am I going to do? I'm going to read it right now.
Yeah.
It's 1 Peter 3:1. It's likewise, wives, this is the ESV, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives.
Boom.
Now, that does not include abuse, adultery, and we can get into all that. But if a man is short of those things, short of criminal or divorceable, and that's a whole other conversation that we can talk about and probably should. Short of those things, if a man's behaving sinfully, that doesn't give you the right to disobey, because your agreement is not with him. Your agreement is with God. That's what covenant theology is that men, women, and children are in their specific hierarchical order, not because the man has some authority that makes him better. It's because the man, woman, and children are all in submission to God, who commands us to be in certain relationship to each other, in the same way that God the Father is the head of the incarnate Christ, is the head of the Holy Spirit, right? It's that a covenant. They're not definitely not the Trinity itself. They're not any inequality in there. They've covenanted in a specific set of roles, and that's reflected in the family, right? So it's not
It's like the Jews, like they're not better because they're the God's chosen people. They're just the first.
not
You
God's
know,
chosen
they-
people anymore.
It's an order of
Not
process.
no more.
But let me ask you, I'm going to
No,
push
but
back
that's
on that.
your
I'm gonna,
YouTube channel,
That's
bro.
still this is the same idea. It's like it's giving it like qualifying it as someone like of a higher importance. Like when it's like this is like a body of Christ. You don't get far without feet, bro, or without a butthole. But everyone wants the eyeballs and the lips and everything else. But it's like good luck. You just want to
Well,
be with
I
those.
would ask like a return question because I know where you're going to go with it. Would
Do
the
you?
man be required to still love his wife if she's not submitting to him? Because that'd be kind of like the inverse of it.
Well,
Like
here's okay. So what I see happening, I had this conversation with Glenn. So what Peter's saying, I believe what he's trying to effectively dismantle for the Christian wife at that moment is saying like your husband's never going to be perfect. You know, and we know that we are all living in a fallen state. So you're always going to be able to pick a fly out of the ointment with your husband and say he's not submitting to Christ. I mean, it doesn't matter if he's the Pope. You're going to be able to find something about him that doesn't line correctly with the Bible, and you can go and petition the Lord about that and say your husband is a failure. So we have to have, if you have two people that are in submission to Christ, they're going to recognize they're both working out their salvation. This is an iterative process. So I believe that's what Peter is saying, is your wives, your husbands are never going to be perfect, but if they're pursuing God, you need to submit to them. And so I think that in itself is like, are they pursuing God? Can you see fruit? Are they bearing fruit? Are you seeing growth in their life?
but you're
you know-
saying if you're not seeing growth, they wouldn't have to submit to him anymore.
It depends, man. This is where it's a very murky subject because you have to love your wives, right? Like Corinthians, right? So he says, "Husbands, love your wives; women submit." And it's like
And
those
respect.
are respect, right? Those are the hardest things for husbands to do. It doesn't mean don't do all this other stuff. It's like the easy stuff Paul's not talking about. He's talking about the hardest stuff for us to accomplish in relationships. So for wives, you're going to have to submit, you're going to have to respect, and for husbands, you're going to have to love.
Shout out to Glenn Lawrence.
Yeah, so it's not like it was an exhaustive, like Paul's using economy of words. He's saying this is the most important issues that you will fail at every time. So hyper focus on these things because the other stuff will fall into place if you can get these things done. But I mean, the only reason why I bring up the submission to a husband who's bearing fruit is because unfortunately, when we're talking about a feminized church, most of these men are dead in their walk. You know, and I feel like if the wives submit, it will help things. And I know that's what Peter's saying, like it will help things, but generally they're not submitting to something that's negative, that's bad. They're just submitting to good things anyway. They're not being cantankerous housewives, just ruining a good moment for the sake of ruining because they can. You know, and so that's where I kind of see those verses lined up and stack up. You know, because I have a
response for that, and I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And the challenging response is there's a guy on my podcast, Dr. David Edgington, who wrote a book called The Abusive Wife, and it's about the ways that women verbally abuse, or the biblical term is revile men, the way that they persecute men with their words, right? Because women without a weapon can't generally physically harm men, but they can shame us, they can harm us with their words, and they do, and they can harass and all that. And they can do that to their husbands, and we see that in the divorce industry, which is another conversation. So in this book, he lays out the case of how badly some husbands are treated by their wives. And what does a husband do in that situation when he's not being respected, when he's being actively disrespected by his wife? And it's so painful to read some of these scenarios that he describes from his counseling practice. And it's so challenging because it's like, what is a husband meant to do? Like, surely he can divorce his wife in this situation. And the Christian answer to that is like, no, he can't. He can't. He must wash her with the word, and he must allow this to sanctify him and make him holy. And ultimately, if she's truly dead in her walk and not regenerate, that holiness that he grows in will drive her out of the house, right? But he must use this trial to sanctify him. And I think that's probably what Peter is saying in a parallel way, that if your husband is not performing according to the word by either by an objective standard or by your own subjective standard, you're allowing it to sanctify you and make you holy, will guide him. This is what it says. It's like we'll be won without a word by the conduct of your wives. So if you let this trial sanctify you, your husband will see that, and it will bring him back into covenant union. And I think that's what Peter is saying, in the same way that Dr. Edgington's saying is like, look, you can't leave your wife because she's reviling you. I know, I get it. Allow it to sanctify you. And it will either sanctify her in response, or she'll exit. And, there's other consequences in our divorce-centric society for that. But I found that so challenging. And I asked him about it. He's like, no, that's just kind of, it is what it is. And he laid out the case. I'm like, okay, I can see you're right.
Yeah, submission is a rough word. It's not like it's qualified by you understanding why you should submit. You submit because it's your job. That's what you do. It's like a
And
very
you find freedom in it.
What?
You find freedom in it. I think, under a good man, for sure, submission is liberating from the expectations of society.
You get to watch God's hierarchy of relationship actually work, which is why women are pergamous, because they don't want to get locked down with Mr. Idiot.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it makes
sense. The whole piece about she's got to submit to you regardless of your performance. Well, there's got to be a response to this weaponization of this idea that, well, if he was just Christ-like, we wouldn't have these problems. Well, it's like, well, I think you're conflating being Christ-like in your fallen state and in your walk with Christ and carrying your cross with the literal Jesus Christ, which there's only one. It's like this idea you see in the masculinity space. If he's just masculine, he's going to lead you, and you're just going to be a perfect, in your feminine energy and state all the time.
Right.
You just got to be the right leader. It's like, no.
Right. I hate that.
It's just the worst, man.
The red pill Pharisees.
That's exactly right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And also in Proverbs, a lot of what gets lost is a really good woman. He talks about how she goes into town. She talks to the merchants, gets the best deals on the best linens. She organizes the household. She does investments. She takes care of she
buys land.
The vineyard. All this to buying land. She's doing a bunch of stuff. The man's you want, this is what your woman you should be doing. And it's what Mike just described is this little girl who's just been taken care of. And you're just there's daddy. He's taking care of everything and every one of your needs. And that's not a real woman, and that's not what submission looks like, and that's not what being married is looking like. And I think some guys get this idea that they're gonna have this woman, yes man, hanging around that they're never gonna have to contend with. It's nah, that's not what submission means either, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not what love means. It's not what respect means. Marriage, any two people trying to build a life together are going to struggle with the friction points between their personality.
Yeah. That's right. If I respect you, Will, and I don't understand something, I'm going to ask you what's up with that, right? And then you're going to explain it to me because you love me. I'll just I'll be the chick, right? So that's
you have the hair for it.
Goes. Long hair, so it's pretty nice.
Well, we also got Genesis 3:16 at play in all of this too, where it's we got the desire going against each other, and it's a part of the curse essentially.
Well, and men and women are so totally different in our souls in so many significant ways. Alison Armstrong, if you've heard me talk about her, she goes into this that for example, men our psychology is very and I don't mean this from a secular. I don't mean to psychologize the conversation, but we think with single focus, right? We zero in on one thing at a time. And she writes about how women think with diffuse awareness, which is they're kind of aware of lots of little details all going on in their environment, right? Yeah. And that makes sense because for men, we're focused on the task at hand, whether it be hunting or producing a result or something like that. And women's psyches are more tuned for diffuse awareness, for caring for children, right? Okay. And now when you ask women about this and the number of things that they are aware of in their environment is like would drive any of us crazy. And they're like, oh yeah, you're not aware of that? Like, I'm paying attention to that right now. Like, what are you talking about? You're paying attention to that. And they're like, you can't see it? I'm like, no, I can't see that at all. So we're so fundamentally different in these beautiful complementary ways. And so when you deprive people of understanding the way that that works, you just increase the friction points. And I think that has also been taken away from our society of teaching women particularly. Well, it happened for a while for men too, but I think women used to be taught about men. I think wives used to, mothers used to teach their daughters, this is how men are, and this is how you can navigate around men and how you can appreciate and love them. That went away with feminism, right? And so the difference is that I think it also went away with men teaching their sons about how women are, but it got rediscovered through the back door in the red pill, pickup world, right? But now we don't even understand each other anymore. We're all trying to be some sort of like materialistic version of the most common kind of man. But when you actually rediscover, when men and women both rediscover the way that we're made to be, and we're taught about each other, you can produce a beautiful union that way. And you can remove a lot of friction points because you don't have to learn by experience who this person is that I live with, who's this other species of creature almost.
It's brutal doing it. I mean, I don't even think you could succeed doing it that way. Hell.
Well, a lot of people try. I think that's why marriages explode. Exactly. It's like women think men think like women, right? Like a broken version of women.
It's schizophrenic.
It is.
Yeah. So I don't like when you said like don't mean to bring psychology into it because that irritated me because it's like that's the red pill, like that's psychology, like we should be underlining the Bible with that all the time. It's like here's science, here's psychology. I
don't mean to make psychology the authority. It's probably what I was trying to say.
No, it just underlines. It just like highlights, man. It's just like this is why. And a lot of people, like if they're just reading the Bible, they'll just be like, oh well, this is old. It's just the same way like Jordan Peterson was able to like elucidate like stories to me that were more profound than any preacher had done for a long time. He's like, look at these stories this way. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I think it's great. And like we were talking about the red pill and like that psychology, I just wanted to underline that. I think it's beautiful. It's one of the reasons why I love you so much, Will. It's because like you just like underline, support, and just come down with the hammer Augustus, and it's like that's awesome. It makes believing so much. Not that it just makes believing so much easier, bro. Yeah, and I think to your point, Will, if we all really studied the Bible and understood the implicit lessons within it, we would see that psychology play out, especially in the Old Testament relationships. We would see it. But too many people are explicit with all of the Bible's lessons, It's like when you read the story of Abraham and Sarah, right? It's not saying that all these things happen and then this is why. It says all these things happen, gives you the end product, and expects the implicit nature of the story for you to absorb that. But the church is kind of lost on that. So the psychological state, the biochemistry that we have and the testing and like the studies, I appreciate that so much. I really do feel like it helps people understand themselves. And then you can point to the implicit stories in the Bible and be like, well, look, it is here.
Yes. Yeah. I thank you for saying that, guys. I point that out because we live in a secularized culture that has made psychology a form of God. Where it's like, oh, Freud and Jung, especially coming from the New Age world, where it's like, oh, Carl Jung said a thing, ooh, right? And so I want to, I'm sensitive to that, but I agree with you that that there can be, if we take that as a starting point and then view these things through the lens of the Bible, we'll find them, right? And I think so. On that point, we agree.
It's like the New Age, they deified those guys in the church. If it's a secular resource at all, it's just like not even on the table. So we need a little bit of that. I think it's really good. It's like we're still living in the post, or what is it called? The Enlightenment period when science is against God. It's like, no. Science created everything. Like we can underline and expound upon this. It's okay.
Cool.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Mike, when you this is so interesting to me. It's like when you were saying like you were threatened, or like when you saw your wife, you were like, what's the word you use? Like intimidated, or like when you met her, you just want to like run away or something. Like
you weren't good enough, or
like you were.
Yeah, I was. It was that there was a fundamental like unworthiness there for sure.
Right.
Because I had reduced myself down to a sexual object, right? Just like these women that I was cheapening in my pursuits. And this is what I think Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, and a lot of his meanderings, I think I get just lost in the weeds. But one thing I could definitely agree is by treating other people like that kind of object, you treat yourself like that kind of object. So when something real presents itself, well, how are you able to accept it? And then you compound on top of it, insecurity from childhood, growing up in a fatherless home. I grew up the fat kid, all of a sudden lost over 100 pounds, started making money in business in my early 20s. So I became, in my early 20s, when I had no capability to handle that kind of worldly, power, all of a sudden I became that, I guess what the manosphere calls the quote unquote, I hate this term, high value man in my early 20s. I wasn't prepared to do that. I wasn't prepared to wield that kind of power. And I just let it almost ruin me in my 20s. And so through all those pursuits, I didn't realize, but I was like, okay, well, I'm just as cheap as these women that I'm seeing in this way. And so when I met her, and I was like, holy, I was presented with this quality that I did not see in myself. That was there. I just didn't think I was worthy of it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Have you ever read The Great Divorce?
No, I have not. I have not.
That reminds me, C.S. Lewis. You should read it, dude, because it reminds me of, like, there's this bus that goes from hell to heaven, and people from hell can, like, check out heaven. And, like, when they get off the bus, it's like the grass is sharp and is, like, cutting their feet because it's so real. Like, they're living in this, like, hollow place, like, kind of like you're saying, you were hollow, you're, like, objectified, like, there was no substance, And then you're confronted with, like, purity that's, like, diamond hard, and you're like, oh, boy. Like, the people get off the bus, and a lot of them just take a step out, and they're like, maybe go back on the bus,
Yeah.
Dude, no kidding. And this is, to your point earlier when you're saying, how can you speak to these young guys that haven't experienced it? It's like, well, I can just speak to the pure abyss and how the depression of it and the depravity of it, that eventually you stare long enough into the abyss, it stares back at you. That most of these encounters, I was intoxicated, I was on drugs, and I felt this deep shame. And this is something that's not talked about. A lot of these red pill guys, I swear to you, feel this, and they hide it, and they want to shy away from it. You know that feeling you get, that you've gotten. I don't watch pornography anymore. Thank Jesus. That shame that you just want to close the laptop. Dude, it's the same thing, but it's worse with another person because you're dragging another person into it with you.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's the point that I'm talking about. I think if we say it enough men will avoid it because, dude, there is a deep shame. Why do you think that so many of us have to be intoxicated to experience that? And I say this quite frankly too. I was on, like, erectile dysfunction meds through my 20s because of this really warped sense of relationship with sex that I had, and I thought it was normal because for me it was performative. It was like a sport. I wasn't doing it. I was like sowing my wild oats because of this lie that the world told me, and it was one of the greatest lies ever told to young men because they end up coming outside of their 30s broken. Because, hey, listen, the red pill guys want to talk about it lowers your bonding ability. It lowers a woman's bonding ability. It lowers a man's bonding ability too, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The threshold may not be as let's say for a woman, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, name the number. It might be a little bit higher for men, but it's still there, buddy. And let me tell you, and none of these men want to talk about it. They want to talk about how cool it is to rack up a notch count. You want me to tell you how much that served me in my marriage, my intimate life with my wife? It has not served me at all. Jack shit. Zero.
Yeah. And I was talking with a friend about this the other day because I see this narrative, the way that I've seen it. Yeah, this narrative they're pushing on men to rack up that notch count. It's sinister because what they do is they'll ask the women, like on the panel, like, what do you think the average body count of a woman is today? And they give these, like, absurd numbers,
2,000,
which are probably partially true.
It's busy.
And then they ask the women, now, if you're going to get married, would you prefer your man to have more or less experience than you? And they pretty much all say more. And so then they're like, well, dudes, you got to go get some experience if the average chick's running around with 15 bodies and, like, they want you to have more experience. And I'm like, we need to debunk this idea because it's, well, number one, it's like these are the women you're not going after anyway. Like the average woman should not be the one you are pursuing. So it's an irrelevant stat anyway, but
we need to hear some of these virgin, like, marriages on both sides.
I know. I wish.
Come on out of the woodwork. Let's hear about how the sex was.
It's on fire.
How much better was it?
White fire.
Come on, baby, preach it.
Like
Because
this
we're not
table.
hearing enough of it.
I mean, that's
Well,
what
it's
they
so
need to
rare.
hear about, man.
Hey,
Like-
yeah, hype it up.
Yeah,
I can at
hype
least
it up.
I can at least speak to being like a former red pill guy that did the thing, that got married, and I can tell you the experience in marriage trumps by infinity,
Yeah.
dude. In
Go
terms
from
of
bam slam to actually making love. It's like, wow.
yeah, exactly. And some dudes are like, "Yo, that's gay, bro." It's like it's only gay, but dude. Honestly, these red pill dudes are acting like gay.
They
dudes.
are the ones that are gay.
Yeah, they're homosexual, heterosexuals. That's what they are.
Probably dude.
They absolutely are. It's the gay cruising element, but for straight people, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to say, but when you're making love, dude, like that's, dude, read Song of Solomon, man. That's why there was
Beautiful. It's way better.
You know,
Yeah,
we
better,
were on. To agree with you, we were on this podcast. Will and sorry, Mike.
We wish
Mike,
you were there, Will.
We wish.
I wish I was there too.
Spirit, I would have been way better with my words, which always come out like crap. But anyways,
Fine.
we were talking to this girl, and she was like a dancer, like a exotic dancer, and she had this past, and she told openly, she's like, I hoed it up big time in my past, and she was a very honest person. Like she wasn't trying to like the red pillars, like you had just said, trying to paint. They're like, oh, it's all glamour and goodness every time. She was like real, and she like looked at Mike and I. She was like, after I like look at this porn and then have this sex, I'm just like looking back when it's done. I'm like, I can't believe like that was like, ugh. And she was even honest enough to say that. And I thought that was like, that was like, you just
I don't know
hear
if
it
she's
very
really
often.
left the lifestyle, but
Well, it's just
it was a very unique situation. We got invited onto this basically OnlyFans girls podcast, and we were like at first like, do we go on this? Like, what do we do?
She was
here?
asking to hear the gospel.
And so we were like,
Gotta
actually, she when we met her like
Sweet
when we were
person.
filming another
Sweet
podcast, and she was like, maybe you guys can tell me what like actual traditional values are, because I'm like hearing them from like Mike Sartain and these other guys in Vegas, and that doesn't make any sense. So we're like, we'll come chat with you on this, and so we got to have this. It was a very productive conversation. Like, even though it's not our audience, and we're probably
It's
like,
because she's an honest person.
Yeah.
Like, she was an honest person. She wasn't trying to pull any, like, she was open.
Yeah.
And she wanted to hear it. And that's what's so cool. Because you don't hear that a lot, especially from the men. They'll never tell you what Mike just said. Like, they'll be like, it's the best thing. Like, they'll never, like, they don't apologize. They don't, like, all that stuff's just, like, beneath them. They're like, nah, it was awesome. / I wanted to kill myself afterwards.
well,
but
some
no.
do, like Neil Strauss, he will not talk about it anymore, like the game book. And it's kind of funny because he kind of went through, I think, what you did, Mike. I remember reading that book. Like, the one girl captured him, and like he couldn't get her, and he would like, and I think he probably had a lot of those same feelings. And then when he did eventually get her, like, he had to write a book called The Consequences of the Game, and about kind of how the degeneracy.
Consequences of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trading your
And
integrity in.
he won't do any interviews about the game anymore because he realizes just the degeneracy of it. Like he said,
Yeah.
he cheated on her pretty much immediately because his brain was just so wired for the variety, like, and like that crushed him that he even went and did that.
That's messed
And,
up. Man. He ruined his own life.
Yeah.
Well, Rush V, right? He became Eastern Orthodox. He was raised Eastern Orthodox or Greek Orthodox, and he deleted his Return of King site, I think, pulled all of his books from Amazon, burned them all.
Wow.
Right?
dude.
Like he had a full on repentance. And I actually got in an argument with one of the leaders of the manosphere about that. Oh, he's just faking it. It's BS. It's for clicks. And I'm like, but look at all these things he did. He's like, he just did that, because he's faking. I'm like, well, that's exactly what someone would do if they were repentant.
Yeah.
And what I took away from that interaction is that the red pill manosphere has no image, no idea of what repentance is.
No.
They don't understand that you can actually be healed and redeemed from bad choices. Like, if you live in a godless world, there's no redemption from your past. You just carry it with you and you double down on it. But those of us who are redeemed in Christ, we can be healed and transformed and made whole. And that's one of the saddest things, is to see as the Christian, not the trad, because I think trad is in many ways kind of LARPing. But as the Christian space moves in, takes over Twitter a bit more, you see a lot of the red pill manosphere guys, posting memes and stuff like that, like girls with used up holes and stuff like that. It's like, it's so tragic to see that, because not only is it, it reflects their attitudes towards women in general, it surfaces them, but it's that they can't imagine what it is to be redeemed from sin. And I pulled up this verse actually, 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. And to really let that land, like whatever it is you're doing with someone else, like, yes, you sin against them, you sin against your own body. Like, feel the gravity of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course, forgiven and all that, but to sin against your own body, to recognize that I did that, and the repentance that I had to go through, like,
well, it's profound. I think it also speaks to the fact that you're forgiven, but it doesn't erase consequences. Like, you're going to walk around with scars, bro. And it's going to take time for those wounds to heal. And it's like you're sinning against your body. This is not a metaphysical issue here. You have like a literal issue with your body. And someday science will probably prove that this exchange of what we call integrity and being promiscuous actually does affect the body and the mind. I'm sure that's going to happen someday.
The marriage stats show it 100%.
Yeah, divorce rates for... Yeah. And
look at celebrities. Look at their faces. Look at the way they rot and wither. You think they're, living godly lifestyles?
And they're actors. They're trained to conceal it, and you can still see it, man.
Hey, Dave, pull up that comment, because this, I think, will lead into a good next question here. From JR, Christian men practically look and see women choosing players and former players. How are men to be incentivized to prioritize celibacy if they observe this?
Okay, this one's for Mike. Mike needs to answer this question, because Mike's going to have a daughter, and he knows what she's going to be interested in, and he's going to have to,
Yeah, because it is true. Like, a lot of men, like Christian men, will look around and it's like, well, all the beautiful young girls, even if they're Christians, are picking the players.
That was kind of Mike's wife's thing.
Yeah, and like, I can see that it's
They want the best of both.
All right,
worlds.
he's throwing you a toughie, Mike. Come on.
Well, I think
he was
it's
a
couple
good guy.
I think it's a couple
player.
things.
We love
I think
Jesus.
number one, Christian fathers got to raise their women fundamentally different than the way that they have been.
Oh yeah.
I'm not raising my daughter on a pedestal. She's my princess because she's little and she's cute, but she's not going to be raised to have a princess complex. She's going to be raised. Hey, listen, like, I don't mince my words. I'm going to raise her to understand that she is to submit to her husband, right? And that that man's going to be flawed. And I hope he's the most closest thing to like the perfect Christian man possible, but that's not going to be possible. So, try to pick him wisely. And I'm going to show you, what these narcissistic men might try to do to get in your pants, so to speak. But for the man that's observing this, well, what are you observing in yourself that these men possess? You can still be celibate and have some of those qualities and get those women. And perhaps those are lower quality Christian women that you're observing too. And this is the thing. It's like, I see a lot of, whiny Christian men. Oh, but they're going for the players. Look at yourself in the mirror. Are you fat? Can you fight? Are you broke? Are you socially awkward? And if it's a yes to all of those things, then fix yourself, bro, because you don't deserve this perfect wife. You got nothing going for you.
right.
So how about the socially awkward one part? Let's say he doesn't feel like he can talk to women because he's not allowed to. Like,
He needs brotherhood. This is what it comes down
but
to.
that's
right?
not going to train him to be with a girl, though. That'll train him to be with dudes. But, like, be with a woman, it's a different...
I think in a roundabout way, being in that circle of men and in that environment where you're held accountable, you're shown love, but you're held against the fire, really forges a man's character, right? I used to be somewhat socially awkward, and then being in a group of men that, raised me up in that way. But I was there was like this, I was nervous to be around them because of that masculine energy that I'd never experienced. It really changed the way that I interact with people in general. And so,
a good father figure, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
those
right?
surrogate fathers, that's what you're describing in the form. Well, you get him in your peers if you're lucky, if you can find
Absolutely.
them,
And I think we have to also look, I guess we're in a social media age, right? That's why there's guys like us out here talking about this stuff. It's like, hey man, this is a lot of what I coach with men, right? It's like, okay, this is how you approach and talk to women, man. Like, first of all, let's get the basics right. Ask her out, bro.
Yep.
So many Christian men fail before they even give themselves a chance to succeed. You see that woman at the church that's maybe giving you some indicators of interest. You haven't even spoken to her, dude. So yes, you have to look at social media. I don't think that pastors are going to be able to teach this. So I think men have to take it upon themselves to search out these Christian men that have these families. I think it's irrelevant if they're former degenerates or not. Then maybe the former degenerates got an extra couple of points of how to speak to women. Maybe that's a net positive in the end. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I hope that answers the question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that, It starts raise them right, but we've already seen fathers fail that. I'm trying to fix that in my own daughter's life and my next child that's to be born.
Great.
I
Yeah.
think to add to
Systemic
that,
problem.
I think to
It
add to
is.
that too, like women, like we've talked about this before, how women who are kind of the prodigal daughter types, like they went and dated a bunch of bad boys and whatnot, it's going to be hard for them to be attracted to the Christian man pursuing them, because they are used to the roller coaster of emotions and the pursuit of a man who wants to have sex with them. It's exciting, and it's a completely different experience than a guy who is pursuing them just like looking for a wife, essentially. Like I view like it's going to be a different pursuit experience, and if they're used to one over the other, I think they'll probably find the Christian guy a little more boring, not as exciting, unless he maybe has learned otherwise.
You know, I thought of something weird too. Like maybe because the church is feminized, you know, a woman's going to be more inclined to go for the fixer-upper, because she'd be like, I'll be in charge. This guy has no idea about the Bible, you know, whereas like a guy like you, it's like, this is a real guy I'm going to have to submit to because of his experience. This man is entitled to submission. She knows it inside of her mind. So maybe that is another byproduct of the feminism of the church in the way that they're selecting. I mean, like, to some degree, we have to tell this young man, it's going to be that way. Girls are going to look for bad boys. Unless the systemic root is fixed, you got husbands and fathers raising badass young ladies. But, I mean,
Yeah.
this is another issue.
What do you think about that, Mike?
The thing is, I don't think being a dangerous bad boy type of guy, granted you're not out sexually sinning and doing all this stuff, and being a good Christian man are mutually exclusive necessarily.
Right.
I look at Paul as a certified badass.
Agree.
Timothy, certified badass. Look at so many. Jesus, certified badass. How can we blend the two, practically speaking? You know what I'm saying? This is why the same prescriptions that the red pill guys talk about, getting jacked, making money, you know, learning how to fight, you know, getting in a circle of men, brotherhood. That's going to sharpen you as a man. Iron sharpens iron. We all know that Proverbs, right? I think Christian men have forgotten about that. They just think by virtue of being this good Christian man that they're going to find themselves this good Christian woman. It's like, no, you got to be a man first too, dude.
Well, I mean, the same rules apply, right? If
They
you're going
do.
to take risks, like Paul took risks. He put himself in dangerous situations. He was relying on God through faith, but he was prepared, right? He was prepared with knowledge. He made himself. The same rules apply to the bad boy who's just being an asshole in life and this hedonistic thing. If you apply those same character traits to pursuing the gospel and fulfilling the gospel agenda, you're going to have that. The women are going to see it.
Yes.
You know, but you got to carry it out.
And have a purpose above her as well. Like my purpose and mission, of course, is to serve my family and to provide for them. But my mission, God forbid anything were to happen to my family, would continue. I would stay on this path. It transcends all that I'm doing, right? So it's like, you don't have to have it all figured out. You have to be the man at the finish line, but be the man in motion. Be convicted in your life about something. You know what I'm saying? Because the bad boy has conviction. The bad boy goes by the beat of his own drum, right? All of those things, right? He's a dangerous guy. He's not afraid to say what he wants to say, what's on his mind. He's outspoken. I think any Christian man could take those things that apply to his life and become more successful in that relationship, because we live in a fallen world and we've got to play by these fallen rules. But we have within the container of being Christians submitted to Christ. Would you guys not agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say the bad boy mentality is self-persecution. You know, I mean, at the root, that's where Christ says to jump with joy. If you read in Luke, it's bizarre when you're being persecuted. And so that's where you're going to find your strength. God is your strength at that point. So, I mean, if life is too easy for the Christian man, so he's not going to be robust. You know, he needs to seek out oppression in the way that he's becoming more like steel.
Yes.
Well, they're also that's where the church is so blue pill. They're setting up the dudes for fail. I mean, I grew up in this environment. It's like you think you're just going to be the nice guy, and then girls like that, and then they absolutely don't plug to those guys. And or if they do, then they end up in the relationships like the guy Will you talked about wrote that book on the reviling wife. I think a lot of those guys are probably nice guys in marriages, and they have no backbone to stand up to a woman like that. And so overall, it's just a set up for failure for men.
I think there's also a component of this. One of the themes I've been pressing on recently is just because men step forward does not automatically mean that women are going to step back.
No,
This
yeah.
is where I
Yeah.
get into it with the red pill Pharisee guys who say that like everything is on the man, as if women are deterministic. Like as soon as you step forward, men just need to step forward and everything will be fine. It's like, guys, it doesn't work that way. Men need to choose to step forward, and then women need to choose to step back. Right? Like you can't force repentance. And so yes, I think a man should pursue being good and strong and godly and virtuous, right? And you do that for the virtue and the value of doing the thing itself. Don't do it for the expectation of being rewarded with a woman. That may
Amen.
happen, like pursue God, the kingdom of God first, and all these things will be added onto you. Like think that way, right? And trust, and that's a position of faith because God is sovereign. God is in control of all things. God has a plan for all of us, right? And so that's a position of faith that I think a lot of Christian men will need to get into. Certainly, it's one that I can relate to, of make myself into the godliest and best man that I can, and then trust, right? And that's been very difficult to do, but I found that's been an important place for me to get to. And so that the men who are listening to this know, like, you do it for the benefit of doing the thing itself, of being and becoming a godly man and an
Right. It's not.
example and following
It's a
Christ.
narrow path.
No, you're right.
It's very
And I
narrow.
think I think a lot of the Christian way is just not going to be pragmatic to the current culture, and it's just gonna it
Yes.
is what it is, and it's gonna Will and I, we've talked a bit about, like, I'm kind of predicting we're gonna have this generation gonna have a lot of people that don't marry because living the biblical way, I think, is going to, it's like unless the generation starts turning around, but I just don't view it like we're not attractive to each other much anymore. Women are very masculine, men are very feminine, so there's just this disconnect. And I think it's just we'll see where it goes. But one thought I was having too with, like, men, I would say Christian men, kind of back to that question, because I'm in this boat on, like, virgin Christian men are like coming to us and being like, this is like, there's really no advantage to my virginity, essentially. And I've seen it myself, but, like, for example, I've had a couple guys kind of tell me on, like, women, it's not this they judge that, but they almost feel convicted and, like, they almost run the other direction. It's probably for the same reason, Mike, that you said you were kind of running from your wife at first, is they just like, whoa, this guy, like, kept it together all these years as a dude, and I know how dudes' brains work, and I wasn't able to. So I think there's part of that, that men are seeing, like, man, this is like, I'm not helping my dating life.
Like, I can't weaponize sex against this monster.
That's true. But I would just like, I want to, like, give encouragement to men in this boat. I'm obviously, like, the unique one in this boat right now, but it's tough for the other dudes out there, I think, to be like, is this really worth it? Like, this sucks. Like, I gotta chop my balls off for a decade.
Gosh, I love you, Mike, dude. Yeah, we lift you up, bro. You're doing it right.
Yes.
The
Dude, that's
sex will be
amazing. That's
incredible
amazing.
when it comes.
I wouldn't have
White.
guessed that. I would have guessed that jacked, handsome dude. And this is what I talk about, right? So I think a low notch count is a high value trait only when you're a man that could possess many options but choose not to instead.
Right.
Like, that restraint is so masculine. So I just want to encourage you, man. Like, if you're that dude, hats off to you, man.
I give God the credit on circumstances, because, like, I view myself like any man. The wrong circumstances, I'm not succeeding in this task.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
He's
But
a
ultimately,
humble-
it's
he's
worship.
a humble lad.
Yeah. But, like, what Will was saying, ultimately the action of worship is the reward. It's the most. When the Father sees that,
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's
it's the
why you're
only
doing
thing
it.
we got.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, women aren't the only ones who are supposed to submit. Men are supposed to submit as well. We're supposed to submit to Christ, right? And so that's how I think that's a really important part that often gets left out, because only by struggling with our own submission to Christ and to God can we appreciate the struggles of women to submit to men. And so that's how we can extend grace And that's
yeah.
how grace is also extended. And that's the balance, so that she sees you submitting to Christ in the ways that, you know, you're called to, and your struggle with that.
right.
And she sees you do it, and then you model it for her, and she models it for you. And that's why this works. But in the same way, like, I can understand how, again, you might see other men having a good time, and you're like, why am I bothering to do this? Including because some women find it unattractive. The right woman will be so glad, right? And God is glad, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and if I'm going to be the asshole, it's like they're not actually having a good time.
Fair.
And those women probably don't deserve you anyway. So it's just looking for the golden shroud. It's that you know, you're lucky when you catch it. But
I think a piece of encouragement I would say too is just listening to, like, one of the guys in our group is dealing with this. I think, and I know many friends, the sexual bond you create with someone makes detaching from them so hard.
It's called
Yeah.
a breakup.
And like, so
Yeah.
if you are in a
Memories.
relationship you know you shouldn't be in, like, getting out of that when you have that sexual bond, I can just watch numerous friends go through this, numerous people I know, and it's like you put yourself through hell.
It is
because you have that bond.
lasting
Yeah.
scars. Welcome to schizophrenia.
The amount of wasted years that I have because of that reason. And this is what I try to tell guys too. Imagine this: you're an adult man, you're sitting in your room, and it's nighttime, and you're peering out the blinds to see when she pulls up, like the drug dealer, like you're ordering an 8-ball of Coke. You're looking outside and you're waiting because you just want a piece of that again. We're not meant to break up. This is why it's so hard. It's like, I remember these times when I was younger. It's like this suffocating feeling. Like there's something not right about it. And just to come back to that point in Corinthians where Paul says, "Love your wives and, you know, submit to your husbands." Submitting to Christ and loving your wife and living with this creature that you don't understand in women, that is equally difficult. Just like a woman submission to you, because I experience in these little conversations that should just be harmless, I find myself, my flesh battling with me, my anger. It's like, I don't understand even how to have this conversation. And that's when grace and that love your wife part is accentuated. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's when grace is supposed to intercede. Hey, listen, I'm not perfect all the time, but, you know, if there's a way to communicate this to guys, hey, listen, this is hard for your wife to do, so let me explain it to you like this. You know, when she's having that conversation to you about XYZ and you just want to fricking blow up, yeah, that's when you're supposed to love your wife the most.
It's tough times. That's
Exactly.
right. That's why they say love your wife. It's not respect and submit.
Yeah.
You have to have. That's the point. That's the point. You want to blow your head off, and you're like, no, that's like, I have to be present during this moment.
Yes.
You know, I have to love her. I have to listen to her. You know, really listen to her so I can love her. You know, and that's not easy to do.
No.
And like you were bringing up the crackhead out the window, like waiting for the girl, and like that. How you realize that whole like feeling was like this oppressive, like you're addicted, obviously.
Yep.
You know, and that addiction is like you're a slave. So you don't
Yes.
feel emasculated when you're a slave. Same thing like when you
100%.
get addicted to porn. You're like, wow, I am not a man right now. I'm sitting here snapping the turnip all the time. I can have no control over this thing. It's taking over my life. I have no control, right? That's like where you feel emasculated. That's when women do this, drugs do this. I mean, that men are in control. That's why we're talking about Mikey. He's badass. He can control his testicles. All right?
That's right.
That's the
Badass.
ultimate battle right there, dude.
He's going always in the. He got the Mulvaney tomahawk. He chops and chops and chops and chops. There's
Chop my
nothing
balls off.
left. He's never gonna
But
do
it
that.
chops the women away.
Don't he just chops these women? These women.
Chop the
trying to
thoughts.
attack him. And
I would say I put
The hair.
myself like it is an advantage on the self control when you still got that, because I feel like the circumstances I have put myself in the last couple years, if I had not had my virginity, it'd be way harder to deal with it. Like now, it's like self control is pretty easy when you haven't crossed the line. I think it's way harder for men who have and are used to it to then like just shut it off, and like the boundaries you got to have, I think, are probably a lot different.
Yeah.
Can I read you guys something?
Yeah.
Do you guys know the song "Mr. Brightside" by the Killers?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever
Great
listened to
song.
the lyrics of that song?
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yeah.
close enough.
So it's a song about breakups. And so for men who have not been in a relationship and not had to go through a breakup, it's probably the most raw song about the experience. So I'll just read you through through the chorus, right?
Oh, this is
So
awesome.
yeah, so you can find this on Google. So I'm coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want it all, right? Okay. It started out with a kiss. How did it end up like this? It was only a kiss. It was only a kiss, right? And then the lyrics go, now I'm falling asleep and she's calling a cab while he's having a smoke and she's taking a drag. Now they're going to bed and my stomach is sick and it's all in my head, but she's touching his chest now. He takes off the dress now. Let me go.
Axe murdered.
Right. So what's going on here, and then I'll read the rest of it and then explain it. And I just can't look. It's killing me and taking control. And now here's the chorus. Jealousy, turning saints into the sea, swimming through sick lullabies, choking on your alibis. But it's just the price I pay. Destiny is calling me. Open up my eager eyes because I'm Mr. Brightside. What this song is about a guy who broke up with his girlfriend because he wanted to pursue his career in music. Gotta be down because I want it all. But during the breakup, he's imagining her with another man. And it's like, it's killing him. My stomach is sick and it's all in my head. He's going through the process of breaking up. He's imagining her with this other guy and it's crushing him inside. And all he can do is cope with his visions of the future. Right. And so that's what a breakup is. Mm-hmm. And like that crushing, sickening feeling of jealousy and loss and all that stuff. Like, yeah, we're not supposed to be experiencing that.
We're not supposed to break up. And that,
right.
Just go look back at the Old Testament. If you took a girl's virginity, you were supposed to marry her.
Yeah.
And like
pay the bride price.
Like, the original intention was definitely that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Breakups cause you to like, you cope and you actually make like yourself insane. You have to like tell yourself insane things to get out of it, or you get really good at compartmentalizing.
That's part of the insanity.
Healthy thing to do.
Yeah. Or you get a rebound.
Yeah, this is why it's so important not to confuse the courtship process with sex.
Yep.
You want to see a woman for who she really is, don't have sex with her. Because
no way.
The concessions that we make for these women that are far from marriage material is amazing because she can do X, Y, or Z in bed and you're addicted to her. Yeah, Thank Christ I ended up with the woman that I'm with right now. I don't know what I did to deserve it in a past life or whatever, but if I think back,
don't say that new age shit here.
No, you don't. It's a whatever. Figure of speech. Yeah. Rebuke me. Yeah.
I rebuke you.
It's not allowed around here.
But seriously, man, I think about it, man. Had it gone any other way, the concessions I made for some of these other women, like my life would have been completely upside down, sideways.
Some grace,
man.
Guys.
Yeah, you know, your little head. Don't listen to that head. It'll deceive you.
One-eyed Cyclops has no brain cells. I was gonna bring up Solomon. It's like here's the wisest dude in the world, and what brings him down? It's a bunch of women. It's a bunch of ladies. Smartest, wisest guy. Smartest, wisest guy.
Never enough, man.
Like how much better are we arrogant minnows? You know.
Mm-hmm. Well, it brought his dad down too.
Sewage.
Yeah,
like it brought down David. So of course the sins of the father go to the son.
Isaac and Enoch, the two most interesting people in the Bible, you get like nothing about. It's because their lives went so great because they
you will hear nothing
right.
about them.
It's like I want to know more about these guys. Come on, God's like, nope, you're not good enough, and it won't make sense. So here's all the losers. Listen to these guys. Yeah, you got more in common with them, buddy. I promise. You're gonna learn more.
Yeah,
we're about 2 hours in, so I want to kind of give it to you two. Like, any topics you want to bring up that we're we've been kind of having the floor on topics, so
swing.
Mike,
questions,
go for it, man.
Debates.
It's something that came up. When Mike was talking about, if you don't have that, he didn't have that experience, so it's easy for him to have the self-control. What I can tell you from a guy that's come from that world and into this. The hardest thing was to control in the end was my eyes. And I think a lot of guys that have come out of that red pill space, I can quit the porn, quit all this stuff. The thoughts are only there if you feed them. And this is an interesting one, is that I used to be really in my head with a lot of this just filthy garbage. A lot of this porn gets stuck in your head. But the less and less you think about it, the more you're intentionally giving it up to God and you're just not feeding that beast is not there.
Yeah, you kill it.
You kill it. Like for me to actually think about something with another woman, I have to like sit there and try to conjure that thought up, and I don't want to go there. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to go there. And the final frontier for me, and I've spoken about this in a lot of podcasts, is that it was the battle with the eyes. And then you don't realize. I didn't realize until I got baptized how autopilot that sin is for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of men, right? The first thing that was I realized was, man, I got convicted more from my own sin than from the sins of other people. I was the first person to like call out other people. I'm like, now I'm calling out myself. And the other thing was how autopilot my eyes were, and just looking at people in the not so good way. And
Just a slave. Oh yeah,
it's
it's really hard, man. Yep. Just
Yeah.
like titties. Well,
Yeah,
well,
yeah. But literally though, it's a slave programming, man. You have to program yourself to like look at the floor. And thank God I got a home gym now, like a really sick home gym. So I don't even have to go places
Oh
It's a
yeah.
dream,
where these
dog.
harlots are anymore. So it's like I don't even have that pull anymore. But I don't think guys frequently talk about that battle. Will, I'm not sure if you
We do over here, yeah. 'Cause
Oh,
we
our
got a
brother
predominant
Shannon.
background of
Brother
like
Shannon is-
gym, and it's cool because we'll be in the gym and we'll both be like, blinders on, all that. You don't want to see a butthole or anything. Just like this. They will be facing you, and so we will like get together and kind of have our little, like hurrah, we're doing this. And it's easier when you got your brothers fighting alongside you. When we
Yeah.
were in Vegas, we did that same thing, and it was so much easier because you're collectivizing on your strength with Christ, and you really do feel like a body. But your eyes, really, I'm telling you, like, you can't have victory over this stuff. Like,
Yeah, we're
people
lucky
gotta
there's not that
understand
many
that
hot
victory
chicks
can
that are
happen. You can actually get a sick feeling when you do that. Like that's possible. There's victories available to you if you persist in the war against it. And like Paul says, bringing each thought into submission. And that's a victory that's going to allow you to give more to your wife. And that's going to open up another little romantic cheat code to have with your wife. Like all that beauty is going to be right there for your wife. It's going to deepen that relationship.
Yes.
So but you don't have to. I mean, that battle is a real one. But yeah, to the guys that just say like it's going to be that way your whole life, it's like, yeah, to a point. But there is victory, guys.
Yeah.
One question I had with kind of that self-control topic: how would you two recommend men deal with boundaries in relationships to maintain that self-control?
Like friends with
In what
girls?
sense?
No, like your physical boundaries with your girlfriend to, not go past where you want to go.
Oh, like hold hands or like.
You have to
like
lead.
where is
Yeah, you gotta lead, man.
That's on you. Like that. Don't expect her to enforce the boundary if you're
Right.
not willing to, because honestly, by the time you even get to that point, hopefully she'll have lost some respect for you if you show up talking about a certain set of values and you can't hold to your values. That's not setting a good precedent for your relationship. Like you make a decision and say, this is how it's going to be. Right. And I'm reaching the points like, God, should we even hold hands?
Ooh.
Right. I mean, I've it's all on the table as far as I'm concerned, because you want to make sure that your hormones don't cloud your ability to evaluate the other person critically. And as soon as the dopamine and serotonin start, look, it's important to have those things. And I'm not saying that you should be completely stoic and iron, because
It's impossible.
Exactly. But what you're doing with courtship is particularly from a Christian perspective, is you're making a binding lifelong commitment. And in today's, hyper litigious divorce environment, the red pill guys are right. You are taking a risk. That is the thing, right? Now, I think that ultimately we're called into marriage, and I don't think they're wrong for warning us. I think their conclusions are wrong, but take it seriously. And the second that you start getting the hormones going and you start falling in love, right? And you start losing control of yourself and your situation, you lose the ability to evaluate her critically, and she loses the ability to evaluate you critically. And it could be that moment of blindness that you just overlook a character flaw in each other, and then that could turn out to be a thing later. And so you want to be sober-minded, be vigilant, because the enemy prowls around looking like a lion looking to devour. And that lives with that sin nature lives within all of us. And so that's why it's very important as a man to make the decision to hold the boundary and be critical. Don't be afraid to be critical. Have your brothers around you, consult with them, talk with them, find a guy you trust, who you respect, and tell him everything. Say, I'm going through this process, right? I need to talk about it. What do you think? And that will keep you honest. And pray, right? All these things, because it didn't used to be a question. And you want to make sure that when you make it to your wedding day, that you can look her in the eyes and she can look you in the eyes and say, I do, and you both mean it.
Probably
And then you
use
have
your pants right there. Boom.
Right. Well, I mean, that's
Damn.
He's gonna hit the ceiling so hard he'll poke a hole through it, dude.
Yeah, dude.
well, the sexual tension of of the wedding ceremony and after is part of like the joy of it for everybody, right? That they're participating. Like, we're going to keep you guys here just a little bit longer because we like to screw with you. That's kind of fun.
That's
right?
brutal. I love it though.
Right. But that's part of the joy. That's why we have people at our weddings, because they're participating in the joy of our union and promising. I did a podcast about this week. Their presence at your wedding, when the officiant says "speak now or forever hold your peace," right, and opens it up to the audience. If you don't say anything in that, your silence equals consent to their union, right?
Yep.
And by consenting to their union, you bear a small piece of responsibility for the success of the union. The reason why we have best men and maids of honor is that those people on our side are the ones primarily responsible for us. These best, like the groomsmen, these are the 5 guys that I'm going to turn to when things get hard, and my best man is the dude that I'm going to turn to when things get hard. Maids of honor serve the same role. This is an entire communal ceremony to support the people in their union, because marriage is hard. And so it's a joyful thing that we all participate in together, right?
Yeah.
And so and the sexual tension is part of it. That's why you do the first dance. That's the whole, all of these things have symbolic meanings, but we just do it in this ritualistic sense instead of giving a sense of meaning to all the different pieces of a wedding.
That's beautiful, Will. Love that. Yeah. And that's an encouragement to the guys to get married and invite the families to commingle and deal with all the drama. It's beautiful.
That's right. And learn to dance.
Yeah, learn to dance. Oh,
What do
man.
you think, Mike?
Yo, I've never heard marriage put like that, and like dude, that just blew my mind.
I should do more about that.
Yeah, that just blew my mind. And in terms of self-control, I mean, there's a pretty obvious practical piece here. Don't put yourself in a position where you guys are alone. You guys could be thrown into sin. I mean, that's a big one, right? Because just like Eve, she's going to try to tempt you. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. So if you're expecting
she should be tempting to you.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, she doesn't necessarily need to consciously try to tempt you.
Right.
Like,
But she'll do that too.
She might do that, but like, she should be tempting. Like, I'm really tempted right now just by your physical presence.
Yes.
Forbidden fruit.
That's exactly it. But don't put yourself in that position. And if you're expecting her to uphold that side of the deal, you guys are going to fail. You guys are going to fornicate, and you guys are going to confuse the process. That's how it goes, man. That's the most practical piece of advice. I think guys get a lot of this courtship stuff really twisted. Find a woman, and again, they confuse it, right? Find a woman, ask her out. It's number one. Most guys don't even get there. Most Christian men don't even get there. Take her out for coffee, maybe go for dinner occasionally, then meet her family. And then when like 9 months to 12 months, marry her. Like, it's not really that complicated of a process. It's like, how do you court? It's like, well, like, don't be a nerd about it, dude.
Mm-hmm. If you can't find things to do that don't involve conversation, like if you guys can't talk before you're married, don't expect that you're magically going to be able to talk after either.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's what happens to guys, though. They're so afraid of, squeezing her ass on accident or something. It's like, it's not going to happen. You can talk. You can tell her hair smells
Slipped
nice.
and fell. I had to grab hold of your ass.
You're just like, oh, my God, titties are in my hands. They're yours. This was an accident, Lord. But these are real things, people. I thought about it. But I think you can say things like, your hair smells beautiful. Like there's ways around appreciating a person that the courtship is so good at, like, training you to do. Like when it says love your wife, I heard Dennis Prager say make love during the day and then like basically bang her when you bang her. Like be a savage when you're doing that. But
Did you say Prager?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
dude.
I didn't need to hear that.
Oh, I didn't need to hear that either, bro. Did you see what he's? No, man. Come on.
I did. I tweeted about it.
Yeah, you did, right?
Oh, his conversation with Pints of Aquinas.
Yeah.
About
we did a whole
the
podcast on
Playboy. His
about the
dad,
AI
Playboy.
child corn.
Oh, no, I didn't hear
What?
nothing
I
about
didn't hear
this.
nothing
No. This is a while back where he was talking to Pints with
No,
Aquinas.
this is new. This is
No,
about-
I know.
This
What
is
I'm
new.
referencing is
Oh.
old. They're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
something
We don't
new.
know about this. Yeah,
I
right.
figured if
I
you
don't
knew,
know
you wouldn't
about
have quoted
this.
him. If you knew,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have quoted him.
That's a
But
good point.
essentially, he was asked if it would be evil or necessarily a bad thing. I'm paraphrasing here, Will. You could tell better. But if somebody were to masturbate to artificial intelligence, AI generated child corn, and he said no.
When did this come out?
This
Like a
week.
week ago.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, that's messed up.
Goodness.
That's that Jewish idea of like don't act, right? They're totally about doing things and not
That's
thinking
what-
things.
That's
No,
exactly
watching
what
is
he
an
No,
said.
it-
Watching is an action.
No, well, it's not real, Joe.
Booyah.
It's not real. It's animation, bro. You're talking. That's why
They don't
Jews are
believe
lawyers,
sin
bro.
in the mind.
They're bankers. They got loopholes, bro. They got loopholes. But anyway, the point that I'm making, I was trying to
like
make
an anti-Semite.
because like I think what's I'm an anti. I don't. Some of the stuff I say don't make sense.
Anti-bullshit,
That's all I
yeah,
can say,
that's what I'm
baby.
saying.
I'm
Southern,
not trying
it's
to make
okay.
sense 100% of the time.
Tell you what.
But so
Crazy.
I guess what I'm saying about
Right,
the courtship thing is like trying to make guys understand like it's so nice to be able to engage your wife and make her feel good. Like it's practicing the love part of telling her she's beautiful and like experiencing the poetry and romance without having to grab her ass or something like that.
Well, I
you
don't
know?
think-
That's all I'm saying.
See,
That's all
I
I'm
don't-
saying.
I
But
don't
also
think
know how to
that
get
problem is
down.
as big of the problem. I don't like. Tell me, what do you think? What percentage of Christian marriages they went celibate before marriage? Like, what percentage do you think today?
100% celibate as in no sex or
Yeah.
no
No sex.
what today?
My prediction's like 10%.
Yeah,
Today? Probably.
probably.
Okay, so that just rules out 90% are acting the way we're suggesting anyway. And then like what percentage then of that remaining 10% are actually like not doing anything?
Not even
Like,
stroking the
like
chicken,
my-
choking the
like-
turkey.
To tell like I'm saying like to tell like a Christian girl today like yeah we can't like kiss or make out or anything until marriage like
It's an awkward
it's
first
like-
kiss, I'll tell you that. You're gonna look at that and be like, all right, they got some practice to do.
well I'm just saying like to try I think to tell the majority of Christian girls that boundary it'll be interesting to see the reaction.
They're not, if they don't like it, they're not Christian girls. What do you
Well-
mean we're not going to have sex before marriage? Like,
No,
Uh,
even like
because
some
we're
of the, like
Christians.
I feel like girls girls are fine like just making out and then that's all.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then
Look-
guys are like, what the? I don't want to do that.
They don't
What?
want a
I
giant
don't
Guys
know.
don't want to
blue
make
ball.
out.
No, I'm saying
What is
I
this
don't.
shit?
I'm
No,
saying
they don't want a blue ball explosion.
like why?
I think a lot of guys would rather have
Go
a
make
blue
out
ball.
for 10 minutes. See what happens. You're nuts.
So you're saying they would rather? Do you think they're smart enough to say no to that?
I don't know, man.
That's
a good
like,
question, man.
I feel like as a dude who's been through this, like it makes no sense to just make out over and over again, and that's where it stops every time. Like your boundaries there, like
Eventually, you're gonna cross.
Sadism.
it's
It's
absolutely
gonna happen.
not.
Yeah,
it's
he's
like
right. You're just
masochism.
it's gonna explode.
It's just, yeah, literally, it's going to literally explode. Don't
Yeah.
do it, man.
and this
Yeah,
is the
just
argument
don't do it.
against the long courtship process, like 9 to 12, like expecting that a couple will be able to go 9 to 12 months without crossing some physical boundary is it's a big challenge. It's the same way like expecting, Christians to make it, into their late 20s or 30s and being virgins. It's unrealistic. It's not how it used to. It's not how it used to be. Like Mike, you were talking about your daughter and finding the right man for her. I really think the future is just like small communities of Christian families
I
where
agree.
you basically know, because there's a certain generation of children. It's like, yep, that's going to be the husband for my daughter, or that's going to be, that's going to be the wife for my son, and
That's what it's looking like.
that's exactly how it was, and that's how it is. So it's like, you just kind of know at the certain age, like, yeah, they've always been destined for each other, more or less, and versus this, endless options kind of environment that we
I
live
love
in.
that.
With
Right.
no options,
That's
no real
so
options.
cute.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the way it should be.
It's adorable, right?
Yeah.
It's adorable.
It
It's
is
wholesome.
tribes, man. It's like
I'd love
grew
that.
up with
Future is adorable. I'm gonna tweet
that's
that.
and
Badass at the same time.
Well, I mean,
Right.
it lets the young couple get started. They spend a lot of time knowing each other.
Parents
right?
know
And
each other.
the parents know each other. The parents, like, this is the thing with arranged marriages. It's not arranged and like I flipped through a
They
catalog.
don't suck. You
Well,
know,
it's
if
not like
they're
I
done
flipped
right.
through a catalog and picked the man for you. It's like we grew up in this small community, and the parents just kind of knew, like, well, this is my son, this is my daughter, and it was put together ahead of time, and they grew up together. It wasn't like an ordered bride or husband from somewhere.
We got
That
to
was
talk
what-
to our Amish brothers and sisters because they got that down.
Yeah,
They got it down.
yeah.
Yep.
They do.
I think about the community thing you're talking about, and that's my dream, man. Like the three of us, the four of us, Dave, having kids, everybody, there's like a super hyper consciousness that happens when people are bonded that way. Like you really get the body of Christ. And it comes from talking about taboo subjects that the church treats like, the leper, like sex, courting, all of these like kind of ugly subjects that everybody tiptoes around, but you make that central, and then you have a strong body of people, because then the secular people can't come in and fill the gaps, and that's what we get inside the church.
It's true. Very well said.
I think no one wants to deal with sexual sin. That's why.
Yeah, it's ugly to them, you know.
Well, they want to keep it, right? A lot of people want to keep it too.
Right.
They don't want to give it up. I mean, that was me, right? Like I was this guy. This is why, people give me crap for having tattoos and being a Christian, and I'm not even want to get into that argument because I don't even.
You're a
know
Canaanite.
Yeah, exactly. You pagan. Exactly.
Worshipping Baal. Are we?
But it's like, well, God, where the hell was I going with that? Just the concept of repentance and grace, right? And picking and choosing your sin, being very choosy about your sin. It's like, listen, you either give it all up, you can't just pick one, And I think, but oftentimes I see a lot of people in the Christian community being very elitist about this type of thing. I mean, for example, this is what I was going on with the tattoos. People want to quickly point this stuff out. But it's like, okay, so are we to deny the grace that we've been given? Not that we continue to willingly sin, but so for the men that are condemning the woman that has a past, are you not forgiven? Are you not sinful? And to the people that literally in all of my comment sections, like, yo, Leviticus 14:30, whatever whatever verse it is talking about, scars on the skin or tattoos or whatever. It's like, I mean, there's so much fighting within even believing communities.
Yeah. Selective outrage.
Well, it's like we talk a lot about the casting of pearls before swine thing too. Like Christians like to judge the secular people with their own through the lens of Christianity, and it's like, how about we get them Jesus first, and then bring them in and try to help them out as far as being accountable.
We have more of an ecumenical sort of approach to things, because the selective outrage and this, drawing lines in the sand and having a particular proclivity of outrage to sin issues, like, it's just a bunch of horse shit.
But in the progressive church, it's like going the other way. Like, so we got two.
Well, I mean,
problems,
that's okay to treat sin as sin. That's fine. But like when you go to the Old Testament to find out some of these old laws, you have the King James Bible freak shows out there. I mean, all it's doing is creating spiritual condescension in people. It's the same old Pharisaical garbage. I mean, it's just unproductive at the end of the day. So that's where you live in grace. You persist in grace. You persist in mercy. Where is that? Or am I seeing that? Like I see people sometimes like, I don't eat pork and I don't eat shrimp. I'm like, well, let's talk about your oxen then. Do you have oxen? Because, that was back there. Too. Like, do you? No, you don't. You don't. Okay. So, I mean, like, it's just a little bit of selectivity that people use to differentiate themselves because they don't want to be part of a body. So they're trying to differentiate, and then they end up excluding, It's sickness.
And they need to look inward more. Like the one thing I'd written down that I find kind of frustrating about the church is the prodigal son and daughter kind of narrative is almost becoming the norm rather than the exception. In the way I think they're raising kids today. It's like it's almost expected that the kid's going to run away from God at 18 and then come back when he's 29 or 30. And
awful.
It's like it should have been the exception, and now I feel like it's the norm.
You feel like they're teaching it to their kids, like they almost are owed it. They're like, it's time for me to go be a dickhead.
It's like,
see you, mom and dad.
For me to sow my oats, and I'll come back later. Like,
it's a hell of a gamble.
It's passive. It's the passive fathers, man.
Yeah,
giving them their kids up to the university system and even high school and elementary school system. Like we're homeschooling all of our children. There is no way our children are getting exposed to this radical left social contagion. It's absolutely wild. And you're just in daycare. Yeah. Like you're giving your kids up to daycare. You're letting other people raise your children.
Possession.
Yeah. Do you really think that your 2 hours at dinner with your children is going to outweigh what they hear in school or at daycare? There is not a freaking chance, dude. So then, of course, they come to like 18, 19, 20, where they come of age and they go and they do their crazy thing. And then the dads are like, man, that's what she wanted to do. It's like, really, if my daughter wanted to do that, I'd sit her down and have a nice, stern conversation with her. And if she wanted to do that again, there'd be another stern conversation to be had. There's no way that was going to happen as long as she was under my roof. And there's not this like, I'm just going to move out. Okay. Try.
We talked about this. We talked about this so hilarious because it's like, the Christian fathers are more concerned with their kids having nice shoes, brand new iPads, phones. And it's like, what's being put in your kid's head? Like, are you concerned with the conditioning and like the actual creation of this child's outlook, being able to teach him how to critically think, because if you create a good kid, and you will, God willing, this kid's going to go out there and change the other lives of the kids he's around, because we can't do that, but that kid can. A good kid can. You know, but they got it backwards, where it's like, I got to have this nice stuff, this materialistic thing, and that's going to make my kid feel
I need
happy.
2 incomes because
You know,
of
it's
that.
like, no,
so
you
now
don't,
I can't
dude.
homeschool the kids. And
Bingo.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are the sacrifices you should be making in the church.
I think I don't know if you guys have heard of Joe Boot. Joe Boot is a pretty popular and successful Reformed theologian, and he has a great video that came out from the Ezra Institute. Is his YouTube channel. It's about a Christian way of life, and a lot of Christian. He talks about he draws the distinction in the video about how a lot of Christian families, they think lofty thoughts about God and they care about theology and all that stuff, but they don't actually live or practice a Christian way of life. They
It's
don't
an
put
abstraction.
that's right. They don't plug the theology into right living. And that's what a lot of that is. It's like, oh yeah, we go to church and we celebrate Christmas, and maybe we even read a little bit of the Bible here and there, and we're Christians. It's like, no, you don't understand. Like it's a way of life that lives completely in opposition to the world, right? And that's the beauty of it. That's the incredible beauty of it. And if you're not thirsty to live in the opposite direction of the world, if you can't look around and say, oh wow, it's really bad, and it's always been really bad except for the influence of Christianity, like if you can't get there, you're missing something really important. And to the judgmental Christians who judge because of like tattoos or whatever, I'd like to read 1 Corinthians chapter 6, right?
Yeah.
Do not be, verse 9, do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you. But you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. And like, if Christ can get there and Paul can get there, if members of the church can't get there, they can't see you as being equally inheritors, heirs of the promise. Like that's on them. That's on their heart, and it sucks. And it sucks. And I think this is a problem the church is actually going to have in lots of ways, where you have lots of guys like me, women too, who are so about the Christian life because we lived that other way. I was out there in the wilderness. Mike, you can probably speak to this too. I was out there in the wilderness. I was dead in my sins and trespasses. I remember that. And I've been going into myself and being like, I was really suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. That's a real thing. I knew. And God plucked me out of that and gave me a life and washed me. Like, I don't deserve to be here. And I'm not worthy of any of it from his own overwhelming grace.
Amen.
Right.
That's right.
And for those people like me who are coming into the church and finding that, like, why am I a more passionate believer than the people who have been doing it for their life? Why am I challenging to them? Something's gone wrong. And I think that it's probably set up. There's probably something that God has set up where, believers who grow up kind of, quote, taking it for granted are meant to be able to disciple new believers who are more zealous. Like, I think that's actually a synergy that's happening. But to be dismissed and judged for our sins when God doesn't, when God is no longer judged us, we're counted righteous. Like, there's some wrongness going on there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's just back to Paul having to go back to the church in Jerusalem with the alms, and they forced him to go shave his head with the 4 men who took vows. It's the same thing. He had to bend his back to people's tradition. And it's going to happen to us. We have to self-persecute, because at the end of the day, they're going to try and drag you down. But our hope is that a few will wake up. And here in the West, we do have a church that has the potential to be mind-blowingly powerful if we do our job.
I agree.
Well, I think that's probably a good spot to end. We could, I think, talk for 5 hours.
Me too.
This is great.
Let's go.
We're obviously gonna have to do this again. But yeah, let's. Mike, where can the audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Mike Pantile, same thing on Twitter and YouTube. And if you haven't already, check out the Masculine Revival podcast that I co-host with my homie, Brendan Schmidt.
Awesome.
Sweet.
And You can find me in the Renaissance of Men podcast. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere just by going to renofmen.com/links. And if you like some of the things that I had to say about the Bible, you can join my men's group, The Council, renofmen.com/council, where I do regular Bible readings and voice notes where I talk about what I take from my readings. And I've really been enjoying doing that. Finished the book of John, which was an incredible experience to go through with a bunch of guys.
The gospel?
Mm-hmm.
How long did
nice.
it take you?
It depends on how much reading I do every day, but I generally do 2 chapters at a time, and I'll leave like between 5 to 20 minute long voice notes for those 2 chapters. Depends on, I get on a wave and start cruising through a bunchch of ideas. And
We're
Right.
very
We've been
very
through
slow.
Matthew for 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh.
Year and a half.
yeah.
We do like one chat. We get through one chapter a month.
A month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not. I wish I could exegete at that level, but this is just what I take.
That's
from
all
my
Johnny
journey as a
boy
man.
here. He's
Ah.
got the skills at that.
Slow and
Our
steady
chat,
wins race.
So,
our chat has not been working in StreamYard, so a couple shout outs. Glenn is in the chat.
Glenn!
And gave us a super chat.
What's up,
Shout
Glenn?
out to
love
Glenn.
you, Glenn.
Love you,
Um,
brother. Keeping it real in Vegas since
JR called out one of your tweets. Will, I liked Will's tweet from recently. When a woman is used to a spineless man, if a man with a spine shows up, it feels like oppression.
Oh, yeah.
That was popular.
It's a great one.
Yeah, and he also said the prodigal son and daughter is elevated above the obedient lifelong Christian. I think that's
Yeah, that sucks.
That's what you just said.
Yeah. What he said. That was said.
And
in a
then
lot of
Rusty
different ways.
Fuel, super chat. God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
He's
Rusty.
always in the chat. Awesome.
Rusty.
But yeah,
Rusty Fuel.
thanks, guys. We'll probably have a bit of a hiatus on podcast. John is heading out on vacation for like a week or so,
It's my wife's birthday.
and
Oh, yeah.
so you'll probably see us at the end of the month unless Joe and I come up
Gonna
with something.
miss y'all.
We'll come up with a surprise maybe. But
Maybe.
thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Love
Pleasure,
you
pleasure,
guys.
You guys are awesome. Let's do it again.
Yes. Again.
Absolutely. Run
Do
it
it
back.
again.
God bless you guys.
God bless.
See ya.